Todd,
Here.
Councilmember Saper,
Here.
Councilmember Tull,
Here.
Councilmember Smith,
Here.
Councilmember Fitzgerald,
Here.
Councilmember Alvarez,
Here.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Full house. Pledge of allegiance this evening will be led by Councilmember Stokes. All right. Next item is approval of the agenda. Is there a
Move
motion?
to approve.
Second.
All in favor, please say yes.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Next item. There's two proclamations on here. Next item after that is comments from the public. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak this evening? Oh, did you cut that poor girl off?
That's how I saw it.
Well, I shouldn't turn it on the way that just transpired. There you go. Please proceed.
Hey, good evening. Zach Clevenger, 1028 East 24th Avenue. Just coming to talk about item 21 on the bus service. I see that it's up for a 1-month renewal, so we can kind of try to sort this mess out. So first of all, I've come before the council before and complained about the service and the lost routes. Knock on wood, they've gotten better, a lot better. So, you know, when I come and complain, I ought to come and give when credit is due. So haven't had the alerts of missing routes or buses not coming. Certainly, you know, the cost has shot up a lot. A lot of us, some of us rely on it to get to work downtown, but I can understand the cost being incrementally increased. I mean, almost double with us or more. So that's something that you got to look at, but if at all possible, if we can keep the service. I know that I think that we should have the enclave cities should have a seat at the table. And I don't know how the board's made up or whatever, but, you know, definitely I think the enclave cities should have a voice. And as far as the Metroflex service, I just want to understand that after June 1st, it's going to the Iris, right? And then it'll be the $3 a ride if you're in the zone. So just the Metroflex is something that we've used for years. That it's been free for a while, but I mean, it used to be 25 cents, but it's a great service as well. So just wanted to throw that out there.
All right, thank you. There we go. Next speaker.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is. It's too loud.
How about I hold it?
Hello. My name is Sadie, and I am excited to be here today. I came here to talk about the park. I love the idea of a park close to Seminole. That's where I live. And especially in the summer when there's a lot of things to do, your mom just is being boring, and she doesn't want to take you anywhere, you can just walk to the park. And that space has been unused, and I'm excited for it to be used better. I was looking at the plans, and there wasn't much stuff for the littler kids to play at. Like, there's like one structure. I don't think that they will want to stay there for the whole duration of whenever they're at the park. And they'll end up wanting to play with the big kids, and they might get hurt from that because the big kids are rough. I thought we could maybe add a baby swing for them, or something with like fidgets or something that makes sound or have like lots of color. I also thought there could be more seating at the play space because adults like to sit. Another park I've been to has a tic-tac-toe board, which makes it so there's fun for other people that can't climb up the climbing structure. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we found someone we need to add to an advisory committee for this park. Thank you. Further public comments? Seeing none, we will move on to discussion about River Forest Park. And we'll start with Kim, I believe.
So good evening, Mayor and Council. We are going to do a little bit of musical chairs. So we would invite you to come down to where the staff is sitting now. The staff will move back, and we invite the Parks Board members to please join the City Council at this table.
That's supposed to be me too. Like dead ass across. Oh, I should do.
We got an intermesh. Look, I'm like, where are you going? I'll go every other. We're mixed. I already did. Oh. Oh. Well, we have to intermingle and intermesh.
Oh, wait, but Ken and Liz can't sit next to each other.
No, we can't sit next to each other. You can't? You guys gonna fight? You gonna battle? They slide nose to each other. They're troublemakers. These two. Look, she's still gonna be able to reach him under the table. I know her foot length.
Wish when it's ready.
So we
Hey, I
get,
got
we
size
get
pony.
to share this one.
How we doing?
I guess, all right. Every day I get up and see me in the mirror, I'm doing pretty good.
You go, what the hell are you doing here? Yeah.
And I have had this week probably like our first couple.
I didn't bring my hat. I didn't bring it. You know, it's like we're transitioning from young, like fun,
Like, don't think about it. Yeah. To like, what's happening?
you know, the laughing joke with her.
Is who? Hey, do you guys have all your people for Arts in the Park?
Oh. Thank you.
Hi.
That's me.
What you're doing. Is Heather here too? Did I see Heather? Heather's on the board.
I ran my
Yeah.
elbow right off the table. I don't know why I brought this down.
Okay, call you David Taylor. David Taylor. Heather's out.
Victoria, Amy asked if you have enough volunteers for Arts in the Park.
Okay. Stanley is here. I know I saw Ken Carr.
You've already what?
There we go. Beth. Matt, Valerie.
What was camp out? Well, I heard the liquor license.
Yeah. Is Frank here? Did I see Frank?
I'm gonna go and fill in this.
No Frank. All right. There we go. That's the third. And I knew Liz. There we go. All right. I would just note at the beginning of this, just as everyone speaks, try to keep it somewhat orderly, make sure we recognize and also speak into the microphone so everyone at home can also hear what is going on. Other than that, Lance, it's all you now.
Thank you, Mayor. You guys hear me okay? All right. I am Lance Klein with SWT Design. We've been working on this project for over a year now in a couple of different phases, and I've got my colleague Will, who will also be presenting. Sorry about that feedback. But today, really, we wanted to review a little bit of project background for all the new council and park board members. And in previous meetings, we talked about some outside funding sources, and we want to discuss some updates regarding those. Kind of share where we are in terms of the overall process. If I'm sure everybody remembers, kind of previous meetings have been about the master planning process, and now we're kind of in the next phase, which is about figuring out kind of all the details and construction documents and information needed to bid it. So kind of giving you an idea of where we are at in that full process. We have some dialogue in terms of utilizing some of the outside funding sources. And then after that, we'll kind of review the latest drawings for the project in terms of how design has evolved. And then kind of talk through the latest design with everybody at the end of that, and then kind of wrap up with next steps on the project. So, we kind of paralleled the agenda a little bit with the purpose here, but in terms of the direct feedback we're looking for, it's really going to be making sure we're on track with the design of the park. And then we've got the discussion in terms of utilizing that ARPA funding for an area within the park, kind of beyond the original park design that was shared last. So just to start, this is, in terms of the project background, this is going to look familiar to folks that were on the board and council previously, but we had a really robust engagement process with over 237 kind of touch points with community members. That included both online surveys and open houses. And there was some real strong priorities for this park in terms of trails and play, and really utilizing the ecological assets which are in the park, including the stream and woodlands. We prepared 3 different concepts and kind of shared those with the community, and concept 2 was a strong winner, and that's what we've really used as the kind of foundation of the plan we'll share with you today. A little deeper dive in terms of some of those priorities. We kind of summarized all of that feedback with this slide in previous presentations, but you can see there was a real strong priority for those natural resources, creating and enhancing that habitat, and providing the trails, as well as creating not only play but educational play for kids. Some of the concerns we heard was to avoid disrupting the neighbors, so the placement of the playground really responds to that. There was some dialogue about parking or not, and that kind of highlighted text was kind of a strong recommendation that we provide a parking lot that doesn't require people to utilize East 26th Street, and really preserving that habitat and making sure we're providing a safe and secure park. There are some, we observed some erosion issues in the master planning phase, and there was a dialogue about trying to address those. In previous meetings, we kind of committed to addressing some of those at a small scale, but what we'll kind of talk about today with additional funding is maybe expanding that scope. Just real quickly, in terms of existing conditions, there is a stream that flows through their site. There's a rock waterfall within that, and that's a really great asset we've highlighted with the design. That lower area you see in green is floodplain, and is within the levee district, and so there's additional requirements in terms of what we need to do for permitting for the project, and we'll kind of share those in the schedule. And then the eroded area that we're looking at is really that north edge of the park, abutting the backyards of the neighbors there. And so that's really just kind of a brief overview of existing conditions. We are going to utilize the existing access off of Vernon for cars, and then obviously pedestrians and bikes could use the East 26th Avenue access shown in those blue arrows. So sort of based on that community feedback, this was the concept too that we was selected and we refined a little bit more in the master plan. So you can see the kind of blue line is the existing stream. We've got a small crossing across the stream there. Really just doing nature trails on the west side of the park in that lower area with some seating areas. But then we've set the playground, and that's the kind of peach-colored bubbles there, a little bit down from the upper terrace to be somewhat removed from the houses there. We're providing kind of a small loop trail, accessible loop in the upper area. And that's also where we're locating the parking lot and restroom building and larger pavilion is by that parking area as well. So just kind of zooming in there a little bit more, you can see where we had the play areas previously. There's an overlook where that upper terrace sort of drops down to the stream that we felt like provided a good vantage point. And you can see a little bit more enlarged here, that parking lot and structure. We have another small pavilion next to the restroom pavilion, and that is also sort of overlooking that stream and lower area. That's number 7 there. And then we are proposing sort of a small meadow, more native grass pollinator meadow, as a kind of buffer to the neighbors to the north there, as well as around the parking lot. The rest of that area, shown in the green, would just be typical turf grass, so kids and adults can play and run around up there. So that was sort of the concept design in the last meeting, and will talk through kind of the refined design in the second half of this presentation. But just a kind of brief recap of some of the major decisions that were made during the master planning process. Basically the direction was folks didn't want to do a phased approach. They wanted to build it all at once. The overall design was generally supported. There was some question about restrooms and if they needed to be plumbed, if they could be composting. Ultimately, we decided they needed to be, from really a health code perspective and city code perspective, a plumbed restroom, so we don't have any issues with neighbors and odors.
Can you microphone that as well?
That's all right. The question was about the city code, and I believe I'm interpreting this right, Shu, but you're required to do sort of a wet restroom within city environment, and you can't do a non-plumbed restroom. And I would say even beyond the city code perspective, the composting and more septic vault you see in state parks work well there because you have a lot of space around it that odor can kind of dissipate. I think given the proximity to the neighbors here, we felt like that was prudent to do the plumbed restrooms along with meeting the city code for that. So.
If I could add as well, one concern that we learned about it was that it required daily maintenance. You have to get someone in there every single day to churn it over per se. So that was also a concern from the maintenance perspective.
Yeah, for the composting, for sure. Does that answer your question? Okay. Sure. Lighting was discussed. Ultimately, the decision was just to do minimal kind of safety lighting on the parking lot and not provide, pedestrian lighting throughout the park, really thinking, it's a dusk to dawn park, so people shouldn't be using it after hours. But we do want to provide that kind of minimum security at the parking lot. I don't know if this was discussed in the last meeting, but in working with Victoria, it was brought up that they need to basically purchase a Kubota structure like they have, and keep that on site so they're not having to drive it over there. So we've added an additional storage area for that vehicle that just adjoins the restroom and pavilion. That would be, an unheated space, so a relatively low cost to sort of add that expanded structure for that vehicle. And that will really help them maintain this new park a lot easier. There was the kind of discussion of trying to address some of the erosion on the north slope. And as discussed, we're hoping to kind of expand that based on the additional funding. And then in the meeting, we talked about submitting grant funding for the Land and Water Conservation Grant as well as the ARPA grant. And I think just for the sort of new council and park board members, really the idea was to design this park that really builds community, invites gathering, and creates a kind of unique experience that you can't have at Dagen or Mackin, and really embraces those natural assets and promotes new experiences. So, in terms of those outside funding sources, the ARPA grant had a pretty high ask for that compared to a lot of the other grants, and the city was fortunate enough to be awarded that $1.25 million grant from ARPA. There are some strings attached with that, and we'll talk a little bit about those in detail later. And some of those strings include some additional kind of due diligence from a design standpoint in terms of permitting. And then, with the procurement, there's some additional requirements for that. I believe the city is still waiting on word on the Land and Water Conservation Fund. That one is a smaller amount, only $500,000. And if folks weren't aware, this was a land and water conservation project probably back in the 80s when that land was purchased. And those funds are really focused on improving environment and access to nature, which we feel like this would be a good fit. So I think Kim and I will kind of tag team this slide a little bit. That funding was just announced in March, I believe. Anthony and Kim attended a training session in April, and those agreements will be kind of figured out next month. So this is all pretty fresh and new, and to a certain degree still evolving in terms of, I think, the city and us understanding the requirements. But I don't know, for the permitting, that kind of 408 permit is basically with the Army Corps. Since we're within a certain distance of the levee district, we need to have them review all the plans on the project. And then SHPO is a state historic preservation office, so I think we're still waiting to hear on that, Anthony, but that may require doing a archaeological kind of cultural site survey, potentially wetlands delineation and other things the state would typically require for that kind of grant funding.
I would like to jump in that if we are awarded the Land and Water Conservation Fund, that this permitting is required for both grants, so we're able to parallel track those.
Yeah, it is very typical for the state and federally funded projects. So I guess with that, I'll maybe hand it over to Kim to talk about some of those other considerations.
So Lance kind of mentioned, we did go through a training session and it was very enlightening. I was very thankful for the state for putting on that particular funding because we would have made some unfortunate missteps had we not had that training. We are required to use the state and federal bidding process. We are required to use the state's contract. So that was interesting to learn. Lance had put into the previous slide that really we are kind of being advised to use the grant reimbursement for non-tangible assets, earthwork, hardscape parking, and the reason being is if you were to purchase a hard asset, you must track it through the life of its entirety, and when it is sold, we must reappropriate that money back into the project fund. So there are considerable strings that were tethered onto this particular grant through the Missouri legislature. So it is different than other federally funded grant programs because how this worked was the federal funding was given to the state. The state legislature then put some additional requirements on it before they had it go out for people to be able to put in for grant funding. So there is considerable amount of oversight. There's considerable of invoicing requirements. Those are things that Nick Hawkins and I, as well as Anthony, will be kind of working through as this project progresses. It will trigger a single audit. I know Councilmember Fitzgerald's probably the only one that knows maybe what that is. After you receive a certain amount of federal funding, you have to actually do, in addition to special audit to further track those federal dollars. So this project will trigger that requirement. We're not anticipating that being in this fiscal year, rather the year that it is expended in. So those are just kind of some of the things. They do play into the timeline that Lance is going to share. Again, it's one of those things, it's fantastic that the city did get pretty much half of this project funding in grants. However, there are strings attached.
So before we kind of jumped into the dialogue about ARPA funding, we wanted to show kind of the schedule for the park improvements, and that's the kind of teal colored line. And then we are still kind of working through the details of the process for the erosion on the north slope. So we have some question marks behind those durations that are shown in orange. I think another thing to keep in mind with the schedule was, since we met with the levee district in 2022 and then started to submit for Army Corps approval to do geotechnical borings, there was an additional, I think they said 6 to 8 weeks in 2022. Now the Army Corps is about 8 to 12 weeks for review. And so we have to go through them just to do the geotechnical borings as well as the final design. So we started that process back in February with the Army Corps. Just got approval a few weeks ago. The geotechnical company was out there yesterday actually doing the borings. And basically those will inform us in terms of what footings and foundations need to be for the restroom structures, what the footing and foundations need to be for the stream crossing as well as the overlook. So once we get that information, we'll kind of use that in the next phase. We're currently in design development, and basically that phase is we're evolving the design, we're starting to really define materials, what things are looking like, really what their size and placement is. In the construction document phase, the next phase, once we get that geotechnical information, we'll start to figure out all the details of what's underground as well as the details of everything above ground and specifications and all of that. Part of the design development process will kind of conclude with a couple of efforts, and those are shown as the kind of green line in play. What we would like to do once we get your feedback today is in the coming weeks basically issue requests for proposals from different playground manufacturers. We'll give them sort of specifics about types of equipment and themes and the area they need to work in. But a lot of these vendors have sort of different elements that are similar. That allows us to sort of review those and sort of select which vendor would be the best to use on this project. And another advantage of this too is we can have the city basically direct purchase that equipment from that vendor and then sort of include that in the bid document saying, you know, equipment's already purchased, contractor installs, and that really saves the city, typically a 10 or 20% markup you might get if a contractor was to purchase that stuff directly. The kind of big permitting process we're needing to do is called a no-rise permit. And basically, when we do anything within the floodway, which is that lower area, in particular that stream crossing, the Army Corps and Levee District want to know that there's not going to be impact to floodwater moving through there or cause that floodwater to rise. So we basically have to model that watershed and then place that design in there. So in design development, we'll basically be creating the model of that existing watershed. And then in construction documents, we'll start to test the designs and see what kind of impacts those have. So the idea was once we kind of wrap up design development at the end of next month, we move in construction documents. We would anticipate sort of sharing those designs, those construction documents with this group again, kind of late summer before we submit them to the Army Corps. And the Army Corps needs to see final stamped and sealed drawings. That review period is that 8 to 12 weeks. We've given ourselves kind of a month after that to get things ready to bid. We don't think there'll be a scenario, but if there is, let's say the Army Corps has a comment and we've got to change the drawings, we have to resubmit and go through that full process again. So that basically adds another 3 months. So we're being really careful to make sure, leading up to that, we have our ducks in a row and have everything figured out. So once we go through the Army Corps, then we can issue things to bid and are kind of looking at construction starting in spring of next year. So.
Oops, sorry. As it is right now, are we looking at January 2025 opening, kind of is what it looks like? I mean, I know
Maybe.
this is very preliminary.
Yeah. Yeah, and they may be, I think that construction duration is going to be a little in flux depending on if we get the erosion control to align with that and that process. But we're being, I think, also conservative with the 9 months. So hopefully it could be sooner.
Several times,
Yeah.
but just for everybody that's paying attention to have a realistic timeline of,
Yeah.
because the end of it goes on another 9 months, right? It says it's working. Okay.
Yeah, but yeah,
Sorry, I have to get
basically
closer.
construction would be completed, that kind of January 2025.
She suggested January 2025 for construction completion. This side is, we're on the struggle
Okay,
bus.
so hold on. I was just verifying the timeline because now I
Yeah.
have the microphone up.
Yes.
The bottom, so it looks like June 2024, but the bottom, it goes on from 9 months past May. So really what we're looking at is an opening in January of 2025. That being said, everything that he went through, there'll be changes every few months to the timeline. I just wanted everybody who was listening to have a realistic expectation of timeline.
Councilmember Sig.
January, you really don't open a brand-new park in January to the public. So we're really talking about spring of that year, of 2025. So just so people aren't planning on any park activities in January.
We'll be skiing in January. All right, further.
And again, Lance
Board members.
mentioned a lot of that is because of the additional permitting that is required by the Army Corps.
I just
Yeah,
wanted to call out, if it is open in January, I want it open in January. I don't want to push off until the spring, because I think Councilwoman Stokes' kids would be there in January. I just want to make sure
Yeah.
we don't hold off on opening
I
it.
would assume as soon as it's ready, it will be open no matter what the date. Because, you get some nice days in January.
You're going to be
and
fighting
people are
kids
gonna
off
wear
of it as you
yeah.
do construction.
Any questions about schedule before we kind of move into the ARPA discussion? No. So we just have one question about ARPA. I know we've thrown a lot of information at you, but given the award of those funds in March, And the recently adopted strategic goal of addressing erosion in the city, should this group expand the scope of the project to address the North Slope erosion issues. We've included some pictures from our kind of field visit with Geotech a few weeks ago, where we climbed uphill to get some of those views. But most of those gullies you see are kind of at the upper slope of that, kind of just below neighbors' backyards. They don't think it's what they would call a global stability issue, which means there's concern about that whole slope coming down. It's really just some of these isolated gully issues that would be addressed. But taking care of those now will definitely help long-term avoiding issues down the road. So
I was just going to ask, these are currently not on private property? This is all in public property, but getting close to the back of these private property. Okay. Councilmember Toll.
When you say, do we want to expand the scope, do you mean, do we want to expand the scope using the funds that are already allocated for the park? Or do you want to expand the scope feeding it ARPA funds from ARPA funds that we're designating to other things? I'm just confused as to.
So I can handle that.
Okay.
So right now, this project is budgeted at 2.5 million. When we made the grant application, what you see is what was in the grant application, which is why we're kind of also going over what the decisions have been made, because that's what was submitted for the grant funding. So if any of that stuff, those previous decisions that have already been made are changed, we actually have to go back to the state and ask for a request to change the plans that were submitted. That being said, so the net of River Forest Park will be 1.25. The question would be, the city had kind of originally envisioned spending 2.5 million on this project. Did you want to, now that we are getting the park subsidized through ARPA grants, address some of the erosion problems that were outside of the original scope?
So now that I understand that, I think our hope was to get the grant. But being that erosion is a serious issue in this area, if we could handle the erosion issue while it was on city land versus try to handle it after it's eroded into private property, that would definitely be preferable and easier all around.
Councilmember Clark. Oh, was that?
That
She
did it.
concurs.
That did it right
There
there.
we go.
I don't know which direction this was headed, but I was glad, and I like the idea of expanding the scope, knowing that it's also on our strategic plan.
And I guess I should add at the beginning, I would support that as well. Councilmember Smith.
I also support tackling the erosion. Do we have, at this early stage, any kind of ballpark number on what we're looking? I'm not an erosion control expert.
we don't yet.
Okay.
Basically, our kind of first step in this process would be to do a series of borings up at that next slope. That's going to require that kind of 8 to 6 week Army control or Army Corps review. But I know it's preliminary. I think, it's kind of anecdotal, but at least walking the site with Geotech and the city and our civil, we felt like we could address a lot of these issues for that amount. So.
Okay. You've walked the site. You probably, I don't know if you took these pictures, but it looks pretty bad. Order of magnitude, are we talking 500,000, 2 million? I mean,
I would think the goal would be to kind of design solutions that align with that 1 to 1.25 million.
okay.
If we can do it for less, I think we would, but I think we'll try and use that money to the best we can on that area. But we are really early in the process on that. So
There you go.
I'm Kath. What do you do? What would be being done to mitigate the existing problem and prevent future problems? Like, are we building a wall?
We'll really know that after the geotech, walking the site with them. The thought was it would be kind of retaining walls potentially to help lock that slope in and hold it. filling in some of these kind of focused erosion areas, probably putting some vegetated mat that would basically help trees establish and other landscape establishing and hold that slope. Those were kind of the things discussed on site that will be refined as we get the geotech and start kind of working through that. But that was kind of what was discussed there. In all likelihood, I think the city did a project that was a storm line in that area where they had to rebuild some retaining walls. They did some of the same practices. It kind of feels like we'll end up doing something similar there. But, you know, with that, I just want to mention that work will likely have to kind of happen from above with access through people's backyards. So there will be some, you know, restoration that would need to occur with that and coordination with those neighbors. I would say it's just really too difficult to get up that slope from below. But, you know, our assumption is those neighbors will welcome that, even though it will be a slight, you know, short-term inconvenience that their backyards don't get any smaller down the road. So.
Board Member Miles. Sorry.
If we proceed with the scope expansion, are there other assumptions to like impact on schedule or impact on other elements of the proposed plan that was shown?
We don't think it's going to impact the proposed plan. You know, there's the potential for it to impact the schedule, and we've kind of tried to map that out a little bit. But we'll get a kind of better sense of that once we get the geotechnical borings. So.
I also have no idea about erosion, how much it costs or anything like that. However, I know this is not the only erosion problem in this area in Ward 4, and I was wondering if maybe they could be coupled together, or if there is any remaining funds, or if they could be done at the same time, or that's just an idea I'm throwing out. I don't know. Ideas.
Can I piggyback on that? Just thinking of other projects that we've done, because this is something that we want to work on, erosion in the area. If we were needing to do this in lots of areas in Ward 4, would it be cost effective, like she said, to do all the erosion work, group the erosion work together versus group this specific erosion work with the park?
I think that's something. So we are working with Tetracon, which is actually on the front slide of this particular. That could be something that perhaps we could talk to them about. I do know that some of the other areas may not be within the city's property, so unsure that we would really have to start pulling some plats and doing some walking to get an understanding of who owns what, where the erosion is. Does that make sense?
Follow-up question. What is your timeline? When would you need to have this included in your scope? Like, if we approved it for the scope, but we still wanted to explore what the city can do for other erosion in the area, when would you need a firm, yes, this is in, or no, it's not, so that we don't throw off your application and your timeline?
I would say, you know, our plan was, if we got the approval today, would be to cut our geotechnical loose in terms of starting that process with the Army Corps and doing those borings there. And it feels like that can move forward even while we're getting maybe some of the answers about.
I'm thinking we could do those as task orders. It's a practice that the city has done before. It allows flexibility to identify certain areas and identify costs with certain areas, and allows the city council to be able to approve those at a per project basis. Does that make sense?
And you know, I don't know, Kim, either with the ARPA funds, if there's any limitations with that it's got to be spent on
Any
this?
ARPA funds must be spent within the scope of what we have already applied for. So it can only be reimbursement. So the ARPA funds are a reimbursement grant. So that means we have to pay for everything and then file for reimbursement. It must be within the footprint of what you are seeing here. We cannot move any budgetary item. We cannot subtract from what we have already told the state that we would use the ARPA funding for. We cannot ask for more money. Now, you can extend your own project as far as the land can see. However, what is reimbursed by ARPA funding is set in stone at this point.
So if I heard you right, you're saying though, as long as we're spending at least, say, 1.5 million to be reimbursed by the 1.25, we're in the clear. Everything that's spent after that is, I mean,
Our money.
essentially, yes, our money being spent. And I think it's just more about weighing out if the equipment's there, can we just go up the road and see how that fits in and plays together? But we really are just worrying about spending really 1.25 and getting reimbursed for 1.25.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, and that the reason why we're asking this question now is the mobilization costs. It'll never be cheaper than it is right now. When you have the equipment out there and the expertise out there, if we were to say kick this for 2 years, it's going to be more expensive. We're going to be disturbing those neighbors, and we're going to be paying for mobilization costs again.
So that's kind of what we had talked about before. That was my point, is the mobilization cost, because this is different than the park. If we were doing erosion protection in lots of areas, would it be more cost effective to do it all together versus this piece of the park that sounds like it's going to be different than the other building that's happening in the park? But it sounds like you're saying, no, it would still be most cost effective to do it now as part of the park. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. The pictures that you're seeing here, it's never going to be cheaper than right now to address this erosion control. Now, what we could do is maybe see if Tetra Con might be able to address other areas while they are mobilized in that
Okay.
particular area. I don't have a firm understanding of where those areas are, what that scope would look like, and what that task order look like, but that is definitely something that we at the staff level can say, hey, can we do some efficiencies of scale here to get the city the best bang for the buck?
Okay, that sounds good. I mean, that was my whole question, so it sounds like it would be good to loop it in.
Yeah, as soon as we can get any information about those other sites, we can start having dialogue with our consultants about that. So, any other dialogue on ARPA? Does there need to be a formal vote or anything on that?
We can do, we good with erosion control? There we go.
I mean, we would
So
be,
mostly head
we
nods
would
here.
be
We'll go with
bringing
yes.
forward more formal
Okay.
documentation for city council action later.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
It looked mostly good there, we'll call it.
With that, we'll kind of move into sharing with you kind of the updates of the design. This first one's not that exciting. It's not all that different, but really we're kind of trying to share what was designed previously in that upper right with kind of the current plan to show it hasn't really deviated too much from what we had back in last year. But with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Will to kind of review this plan as well as the other drawings.
Yeah, thanks, Lance. So one of the things that we wanted to share with this is, yes, there is the continuity between the concept that emerged out of the feasibility study, but there's just been more definition added to it. And we've got, as you've probably flipped through or seen, we're going to be doing that through perspective views because they're easier to understand than this plan. But I think while we're looking at the plan, some of the things that you may be able to notice is just some of the expansion of the ADA walk as it goes down the hill. And then there is a maintenance connection that's been added. So as we developed that for accessibility, we realized that the Kubotas that the city uses could not make those turns. So we added in, that'll be done with grass pavers. So basically that's a maintenance access so that the Kubota can get down there and the crews can make their daily runs and collect trash and, remove any debris or material from the nature trails, the lower area. And then we've just been refining the shape and extent of the playground. So you'll see it's kind of on the edge of the blue there. That is the 100-year floodplain that we're dealing with. So, really one of the cruxes of this is while we're putting this down in a way from the neighbors, it creates a really cool play experience with the hill, but we're also balancing that with the technical challenges of grading and minimizing the amount of fill that we're doing. So I'll walk through that as we look at some of the perspectives. But overall, we're still looking at a similarly sized parking lot. So that would be 7 spaces plus 1 ADA space. We will look at an enlarged view of the layout of the shelter in a little bit, but we have expanded that to accommodate the Kubota and the kind of turning requirements that requires. And then we've just been defining more elements. So as Lance mentioned, since we had that discussion about the ARPA funding, I just want to refresh that we're in the middle of the design development phase right now. So one of the big tasks of this phase is to really nail down what are all of the components of the design, what are the materials, the finishes, the colors, and we've been working with city staff along the way, having conversations about durability and maintenance, and then as we're making decisions and presenting options to the city, we're also thinking about the original vision that came out of the feasibility study of a more naturalistic park that has a distinct identity within the park system that North Kansas City has. So with that, we can jump into the first perspective here. So here we are looking at the shelter as you enter into the park. So we are looking to the west here. Just gonna walk through some of the material decisions here and kind of the layout. So that is a 16 by 24 roughly shelter area that fits 4 full-size picnic tables. We're showing a water fountain underneath there. And in terms of how that feels, you can also see in the bottom right of the image, we're looking at some wood material, so to kind of warm that up, and then selecting a color palette that is a little more earth tones and neutral. You can see in the layout in the top right, we have 2 family restrooms, so each of those would have changing rooms, just at a really high level in terms of finishes and everything in there. We are thinking that wants to be something that can just be totally power washed down if needed. So we're thinking stainless steel, and that's going to be block on the inside with kind of a finish on the walls that allows it to be very easily cleaned. So that is one of the things top of mind for the restrooms. Mechanical room is going to have some facilities for maintenance, so just the things that park staff needs to do to get their jobs done, keeping the park clean and functional. That's kind of the light orange, and then the darker orange is the space that's required to house the Kubota. And we were actually kind of surprised how big those things actually are, but that is all. The orange is one kind of combined space there. So that's about 300 square feet that's needed for the kind of mechanical maintenance storage and the Kubota. A quick note on that in the plan, the kind of purple dashed lines that you see is the turning radius for the Kubota. So that's what's defining how far this building is sitting back from the parking lot and kind of what it takes to get that thing turned around and get it into the park. So that provided an opportunity, the kind of green cloud that you then see in the perspective as well, that is just a small kind of native planting bed. So we're thinking perennial grasses and forbs, so things that are pollinator friendly, that require kind of that annual cut down sort of maintenance after the establishment period. Something that, as you're entering the park with the material palette and the plantings, you kind of recognize that this is more of that naturalistic park. And there's also some signage and things that go along with that as well. So this is coming down to the stream crossing, so where the small waterfall is. So we wanted to give an impression of that boardwalk. So there's still a lot of engineering that needs to be done with the boardwalk. There's a couple of options that we have walked through, but at the diagram at the top right just calls out some of the pieces and parts of that. We want to keep that 6-foot clear width so that the Kubotas can get across and that it matches the width of the trails. The low curbs there are obviously for safety, but we want to try to avoid having the railings there. That is part visual impact of having those tall railings, but also if we can get that height to be below 30 inches, then the railings aren't required. So you have those curbs just for any vehicles that might be crossing, like the Kubota or strollers or anything like that. But that is one of the drivers of the curb. This is a precast concrete product, and one of the reasons that we really like that is that in this floodway environment, they hold up extremely well. So we would have concerns about like a wooden boardwalk, just in terms of durability, having things get caught on it. These things are engineered to be able to handle that sort of thing, to be able to handle higher loads from the water. So all of that engineering with the footings and things are going to be done as part of the kind of later design development and into the construction document process. So the geotechnical borings are something that will inform what needs to happen underground with those piers as well, so that they can withstand the forces of the flooding. And one thing I want to call out with this as well, right now it's 38 feet. The reason for that is because we're trying to get the other side of that out of the regulatory floodway. That makes it a little bit easier for us to move some dirt to get the grades to match up, because there's a lot of just with grading, cut, fill, everything going on within that floodway. You can't really change kind of the bank too much with that. And then this is a perspective of the overlook. So it's about 350 square feet total. We're still walking through options for that. It can either be that precast concrete material and then the same, kind of railings that you're seeing with the wood posts and metal mesh. It could be a wood railing, but we're looking at the precast concrete just because we're also looking at implementing that with the boardwalk. The alternative is Brazilian hardwood, which the advantage of that is that they're very dense and very durable for this sort of application. So on the left in the rendering, it's kind of that richer brown color that would be more of a day one. On the right, on the bottom photo, that is a project that we've done with a wood that, over time it'll fade to this nice gray color. So that's a project that's been around for a little bit, and you can kind of see how that color fades out on that wood. The other really cool feature about this is the play netting there. So you kind of see it in the photo and a little bit in this perspective as well. Installing that feature so that kids can kind of, or adults if you want, you can kind of hammock and kind of look down below. You can kind of make out there's a little bit of that nature trail and a person walking below, so you can kind of see that. One thing that we're keeping in mind is just, what the rise is from the ground. And then the playground. So we've already got some wonderful feedback on the playground. We've also gotten a couple comments on kind of the seating options within the playground. So before I kind of walk through all the different play elements, in general, I would say that there are 2 benches provided kind of in that central area with the steps and the stone. Those are backed. That can give, you've got a vantage point of both play areas, but the design intent with this is that each of the walls that you see kind of coming down the hill, as well as the way that the hill is graded out, the seat walls are seat wall height, so those can double as seating. And then we are anticipating, people like to, if you've got a gentle hill, you can kind of lean back and lean on those as well. But we have heard the desire, making sure that we've got plenty of benches down there. So that is certainly something that we can continue to refine in the design. So in terms of the play elements, I'll just kind of start at the top left there. We're looking at a stainless steel hill slide. That's going to be in the 5 to 6 foot tall range. So that would be accessible coming down the path and turning there. And then we've got kind of stone steps that let kids kind of come right back up and reuse that. The dark green next to it is synthetic turf, so that is a play hill. Synthetic turf is for the durability of kids crawling all over it. It creates a fun play challenge because that is pretty steep, and with that material, it can be kind of tough to climb up. We are looking at features like a a rope on that hillside that just kind of makes it easier for kids to, pull themselves up or work their way down the hill. We've also created a couple of other opportunities with ledger stone to kind of create, you can sit on them, but it's also a way to kind of transverse the hill and turn it into more of a play feature, so you can kind of run up and down it in different ways, whether it's the hill slide, the synthetic hill, or this ledger stone here. So in that upper play area, we have the zip line. So that's at about 50 feet right now. It's a pretty gentle slope. It's about like 2%, so it's just enough to kind of jump off that platform and get going. It's not like an extreme zip line. I know throughout the process when we were talking about that, it's easy to envision this thing ripping through the woods. That's not what it is. And then hearing we had heard some comments previous to this evening too about having a smaller scale play structure. So that's that snail, which those types of like animal forms are really popular play pieces. So that's something that is more for the younger play range. It's got climbing holes. It's kind of got that effectively like tube, and it's kind of got that bench on the end. So there's a lot of different ways for kids to interact with that. Coming across, we've got the large play tower structure. So this has another large tube slide, and then it's got play netting with 3 different levels all the way up. I think in terms of play height, it's in the 25-foot range. I think with the extension of the logs above, it's more like a 30-foot height. So this is something that we've kind of gone back and forth on. One of the advantages to a structure like this is that it's a little more open underneath. So this kind of sits on the edge of that floodplain. If there were a really kind of extreme event, it would be a little more open structure to allow water to flow through. And then it's also got some balance beam elements kind of on the back there. We can kind of reconfigure that to come out a little more in a different direction instead of going to the back. And then the swings there are accessible swings. So it's kind of an all ages, all abilities type swing with a harness that you can bring overhead that accommodates lots of different play abilities. So we've got a couple of those there. And I think the final note with play elements is all in total, we're still around that 4,000 square foot range for total play area. A lot of that gets eaten up by the safety zones and things that are required by the different play elements. So I will say, totally acknowledge that there are some smaller like kinetic play elements like wobble boards and smaller like, fidgety play elements that can be incorporated in the design at this point. But we really wanted to walk through and update with, what are the bigger pieces that comprise the playground here. So with that, launch into, yeah. Yeah, yep.
I think we can maybe answer questions now, and then basically the next slide is kind of asking questions as well about these different elements. So.
Okay, a couple things on this. Is there, and I like the aesthetics a lot, but is there an alternative to the stainless steel on the slides? They both face west into like the afternoon sun, so like I can imagine that hillside in particular becoming a really hot surface.
That's a common concern we hear. The alternate material is plastic, which gets just about as hot as metal. I think our hope here too, and we haven't necessarily modeled all the mature trees and stuff like that surrounding here completely, but we will get, I think, some shade from some of those elements as well. Okay. Those do sort of sit on the ground, which helps that a little. I wouldn't say it cancels it, and they're not going to get hot, but it's not as extreme as you might have experienced back in the day of those metal slides that
it burned into my memory, so to speak. Yeah. Second piece, so as Sadie, as Sadie mentioned, adults do like to sit, and the 2 benches in the middle, I would just think maybe a backless design so you could look both directions might be more effective for being able to watch your kids from all different directions. Just feedback there. And then the last piece on this one, the 30 feet of poles here scares the bejesus out of me, mostly because I take my kids over to DAG here, and I watch, especially the older kids, will climb to the absolute highest point they can reach, and then just like, look at me, everybody, and just like stand on one foot on the top. It's like looking at these, as vertical as they are, I don't know if it could be fanned out so if they do fall, they fall into the net. It just scares.
I don't know how well it shows on these images, but basically to climb up through that, it's all within netting.
Right.
And so,
is it open on the top though?
No, no, it's not. So there are kind of 4 rings in the structure, and they're about 6 feet apart. And so every 6 feet, you've got a floor of netting that the openings are, you can kind of crawl up as you're going through, but they're sized such that, if you're kind of up at the, in the top ring there, you would fall down to the next ring, which would be that.
Is there anything to deter climbing the outside of the net? That's what I see happen almost all the time is climb the outside, climb up the outside of the slide.
Yeah.
Anything you're not supposed to do.
Right. The height, I don't know what the height of that first level of netting to get up to. That's something we can kind of, look at moving forward. That's kind of an issue with all play elements.
Yeah.
People don't use them as directed, so.
Just something to watch out on that one. You're the expert, so it scares me to see.
And I would add too about the play equipment that you're seeing today. This is, we're in terms of materials and play style. We've pulled in some stuff that we think fulfills the vision and goals of the park as laid out in the feasibility study. But like Lance mentioned, we're going to be going through essentially an RFP process where we're going to hopefully be able to evaluate 4 or 5 different proposals from different playground vendors and kind of work through that with city staff to kind of narrow it down and then present recommendations. So definitely the different pieces of this, it's kind of like we're thinking larger play tower structure, we're thinking swings, zip line, and then smaller, kind of 2 to 5 play structure, and then some of those other elements, and all of that will be laid out for different playground manufacturers to respond to and kind of propose, their version of what that would look like going forward.
Councilman Stokes?
My 8-year-old, when he looked at it, was very nervous that there was only one entrance in and that you'd have fights with your friends because it doesn't seem big enough to have enough to climb for multiple children. So I'm just throwing that out as it goes through the RFP project.
And is that for the tower or the playground itself?
For the tower.
Miles?
I love the accessibility elements. I didn't know if I have not educated on the different levels of accessibility with different playgrounds, but is there other opportunities to make it more accessible for kids of different abilities or add different features? Because it looks like the only element is the swings, but would love to be educated.
Yeah, I think some of those additional fidget elements that were brought up by Sadie are accessible. The hill slide, I think those are considered accessible in terms of being able to get a wheelchair up top, kind of parental assistance down, and then access down versus typical slides. I think a lot of inclusive playgrounds take a pretty big footprint once you start to get into all the ramps and different elements to get, people up to those different levels. So we haven't sort of selected equipment with ramps for that reason. But I think another thing to keep in mind about accessibility, and you're maybe thinking this too, but it's not just about kind of mobility and those issues. There's all kind of, sensory and other kind of considerations for that too that will sort of be filtering through with those playground designs too, so.
I don't see any further questions.
All right. So basically, we're trying to get your feedback on the designs now so that when we move into the construction document phase and the playground kind of proposal process, we make sure we're kind of meeting everybody's expectations. So sort of working through the order of the slides in terms of that structure, the restroom pavilion structure. Do you feel like the materials we have selected for that and kind of the overall form and character is appropriate for River Forest Park? I'd kind of add to some of the design intent there is we are trying to kind of blend in with that natural setting, but create a structure that's somewhat similar to what exists in other North Kansas City parks too. So,
Valerie?
That was going to be my comment. I want to make sure it looks like a park within our city and not like the HOA, maybe if the neighborhood's right next to it. So if we could keep like the roofing material the same as the shelters at Mackin, or the same coloring. Obviously, we want it to be as little to no maintenance as possible. So maybe that would be an upgrade versus what we have. But I think from an overall design point, we should make it match.
Councilman Todd?
Yeah, I just want to second the whole shading situation. Especially, I think it is a good opportunity if you are looking to kind of incorporate kind of more natural elements. You definitely can take advantage of some trees for shading. My kids always like to play on the shaded part of Mackin Park because there's one part of that park that is shaded by trees, and then there's a whole other section that is right in the sun. And I think it's a great opportunity to keep the natural look and to provide some additional shading so that the kids can still play even when it's hot.
Councilman Saper?
This project has grown from a neighborhood playground to a destination park, which I totally support, in fact. But one of the things we're missing here is, as a destination park, people are going to have parking. And I know that we've had some preliminary discussions with the North Kansas City Hospital parking lots, which are within walking distance. And I want to make sure that those talks continue and we lock that down somehow so we have additional parking for what has become a destination park. But there's also a limitation on the number of bike racks you put in. Now, I don't know if there's room to expand within the park, but that, I think you mentioned 3.
I think that's what we have just at the structure. We could definitely add more. We anticipate having more at the end of East 26th Avenue for people biking and riding there as well too.
But that needs to be addressed as well, because it is a destination park and it's a very nice destination park.
And yeah, bike racks.
And it's going to be a tremendous addition for generations to come to North Kansas City.
Yeah, bike racks are much easierly accommodated than a parking spot, so.
Is the tunnel part of the slide, does it have to be a tunnel because of the height of the slide, or could it be an open slide?
I believe based on the height, it would need to be
It
a
has to
tube
be a tunnel?
slide.
Okay.
Yeah. They don't let you do those, 16, 20-foot tall
Yeah,
slides
I wasn't
anymore.
sure. That's why I was wondering. Do you need any further direction? Any other questions that you have?
Well,
Oh.
we,
Go ahead, Amy.
I don't know if you did mention that there will be, like, for the structure. No, I don't have words. Where the Kubota and everything will be housed, that there will be, it'll be lined out to have future application for solar, things like that. Just
Right,
as
yes.
a heads up, I know we're heading in a greener direction, and that's just one thing, like one of those tiny elements that we're looking to incorporate eventually. That's not something that has to happen immediately, but as long as we're already set up, then a lot of the work has already been done.
Yeah, yeah, we did not mention that, but basically we'll work with the mechanical engineer to, an electrical engineer to provide conduit up to the roof. So that's an easy add-on in the future without having to kind of do that upfront investment on the solar panels now, so. Any other comments on the restroom pavilion structure? Overlook or stream crossing? Are there any comments on those?
Jesse?
I like the precast stuff. That's going to be really durable. The wood is, a lot of those get like grayed out and it kind of looks weathered really fast. So anything that can be done to like treat the wood or the hardwood, if we're going to go with wood in those spots, would be very useful. The other part is, I know we mentioned lighting would only be around the entrance, but is there a possibility for low voltage, like uplights on the path? Like even if they're solar driven, just like 12-volt lighting that would, go around the edges of the path?
That is definitely an option. It's something we can discuss moving forward. I would say when you look at those low-level lights that you often see in residential applications, to kind of get the level of light an engineer stamping that drawing is going to want to see, you're going to need quite a few of those and spaced pretty tightly there.
So if you go from like zero light at all to any light it takes, then you have to go overboard and use a ton of light?
Typically, like, they want to sort of know that what their design is meets those minimum requirements.
Okay.
That they're.
So if you're a lighted park, you have minimum light requirements? I gotcha. I'm thinking more along the lines of, I grew up in the coastal area, like near Hilton Head, South Carolina. It's like a sea turtle refuge. So they have very, very low, very like tasteful lights along the edges of paths. And if you happen to be walking after sunset, like you have a way to see ahead of you. I didn't know if that was possible, but it sounds like probably not. The other part is, as we transition, I'm not sure we've covered the lower portion of the trail. It's probably another meeting. But will there be an accessible way to get down to that lower trail from the upper that we're constructing?
There is. So
Okay.
basically that new path you see all the way up to the stream is paved and accessible. And we haven't gotten too detailed in the design of the nature trail, but I think the intent over there too would be that nature trail would be as accessible as possible.
Okay.
Not necessarily from a like typical sidewalk pavement perspective, but when you get in the trail realm, there's a little bit more kind of flexibility.
But you could get a wheelchair from upper down into the nature
Yes,
path? Okay,
right.
perfect.
Given that this is secluded by nature and that's what we would want it to be, would this be an appropriate place to put some sort of a blue light or some sort of emergency button light back in the park? Chief Freeman? On some trails where it can't be seen from the street or by the public, there would be like a blue light or an emergency button light that you could hit if there were an emergency back there. Would that be an appropriate thing to add to the backside of a park or not appropriate?
I think we don't typically do that, but if there was justification for that, we could definitely explore that. I would probably anticipate if we're doing it on the other side of the stream, there would be some costs and challenges to get utilities over and across that to kind of service that beacon. But
That's the word I was looking for,
Okay.
beacon. Yeah.
Okay.
I was just curious. It may not be appropriate. I didn't know if that was something that you did or not. I just. Valerie.
I had a comment similar, wondering, because it is a dusted-on park, like we're not wanting people to be there after hours with lighting, but the back portion of it is very secluded. normally parks that have trails have like a street on one side or a street on the other side, where this is seclusion, seclusion, seclusion. And I'm a little worried about just one entry point and one exit point. I don't know if that's something you guys have talked about before and I forgot about, but from a female perspective, if I'm back there walking and somebody's on that bridge that wants to cause harm, can I get out? Through another part of the tray or the, yeah, I just want to make sure, and that's part of what I thought about the beacon too, is there something that I guess we all have our phones, but if a kid was back there and, I don't know, the Kubota crashed on the bridge and they couldn't get over, I was just, that's where my brain went.
No, that crossing is kind of the one access point in and out. We can't look at, providing some facilities on that other side if there are concerns about emergencies and things like that. Any other comments on the Overlooker Stream crossing? Okay.
I love the mesh, which is awesome. Hammock vibes all the way. But what is the height of the between like that overlook to the bottom when you're looking at the mesh to the bottom or approximate?
Like from the bottom of the mesh area or from
To the ground?
max? Probably in the 4 to 6 foot
Oh, okay.
range.
Got it.
Yep. Yeah.
We'll maybe move on to dialogue about playground. We got a lot of feedback on that earlier, but I don't know if there's any additional discussion on the playground.
Seeing none.
Yep. Cool. All right. Moving into next steps, we will kind of proceed with the geotechnical investigation on the north slope once we kind of get the final confirmation from the city on that. We mentioned the playground bid packages, sending that out later in the month in June as well. We'll be starting that no-rise modeling process for the watershed. We showed it on the schedule, but in terms of kind of follow-up meetings, we anticipate coming back in late summer to kind of review those final play designs, sharing with you the results of the no-rise and potential impacts to the design with that. And then that's also when we'll have a little more information on that north slope, and we'll have a better sense of kind of costs and process associated with that as well. So basically, we want to kind of get your feedback, as mentioned, before we move into that kind of final Army Corps submittal at the end of construction documents. So.
Councilman Saper?
Yeah, I'd like some more information about the modeling of the no-rise. How involved is that, and how much does the Army Corps require?
I guess basically they're looking for you to look at the topography of the floodway, and then when you sort of put in a proposed element like that stream crossing,
exactly.
How that would kind of impact what those floodwaters would do. And I'm not necessarily the expert on this. Our civil is, but it's a typical process that is done when you are working within that.
Do we have a sense at this time at how much rise there is?
We do know where those kind of, they categorize it as floodway and floodplain elevations are.
We do have that.
We do have that, yes.
So that would factor into the model.
Yeah, and we're sort of working with those, knowing the constraints. Once
Okay,
that
those
is
become
done.
the basis for the model.
Yeah, yes.
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Yep. All right. So that's it.
Councilman Smith?
Two quick things. Did we delete the trail that goes up to the upper, like off the back of the playground up to the neighborhood?
I think we're still, I think we ended up removing that as we got into the design a little bit more, but I think we could revisit that as we're looking at that kind of north slope and what we're doing there. So,
Okay. So it's still in play, it's just not on the rendering now? Okay, you mentioned bike racks on 26th. Is there an entry point at 26th as well?
just for bikes and peds.
Okay, but
Yeah.
not parking, obviously.
Yeah, we're really want to discourage any parking on 26.
Okay, and then the last piece, and I like keep coming back to this, but having a restroom near the playground is to me like having small kids, like one of my very top priorities. And I like watch at Mackin and DAG, like the constant stream of parents to and from, because kids have that quick trigger when they have to go. Have we looked at proximity of sewer and water to the end of 26th Avenue? I'm not sure what the topography looks like, if there's a possibility for a sewage pump or something to push up the hill from like right between numbers 9 and 10 on the original drawing. I would like us to exhaust all options to have a bathroom closer to the playground, because I know how it can go. Even if it's not a dry restroom, if there's some other way. And if I'm told it's unfeasible, if it's way too expensive or ridiculous, then yeah, I'll accept it, but I want to see us look.
We did kind of explore that in the master plan and discuss the options there. You're getting really close to homes if you're looking at doing that. And I don't think we can have the space to sort of push that downslope into the play area, which starts to get into the floodway and floodplain, which that will be a big challenge there. We can kind of revisit again with kind of the latest information we have there, but we did kind of explore that back in the master plan. I don't know, Will, you got something to add?
No, I would just reiterate what Lance said. So basically, with all of the proposed improvements in that area, even the playground, just having a level, flat surface, having to kind of smooth that out and fill in around it. We really want to avoid as much fill as we possibly can. The blue line is roughly where we want to get really, really careful. But even if we are doing something up that hill, if we create a level pad for a building, that's going to ripple out all the way and kind of push everything out further into the area where we're trying to minimize the fill. So that was one of the kind of parameters that really didn't make us feel comfortable about how feasible it was to do that. If we didn't have the floodplain there, we could certainly look at that. But it's that regulatory requirement with the no rise that is causing us to be very careful about how much earthwork we're doing once we kind of hit that blue area.
Councilman Clark?
Jesse, I don't know if you've walked it over there, but it's pretty close.
Is it tight? Okay.
It's pretty close. It feels pretty feasible.
I've walked over there, I just don't have the full scope
Yeah.
of how tight.
No, because I get it. I mean, I think it's one of those, like, if you know your daughter just chugged something before you went, it's like, go to the bathroom right before you play. But it's within a distance where, every kid's different, but you can kind of convince them, like, let's get there. It's right there.
So just kind of, we'll have another meeting like this after we get the RFP for the playscape. Again, we appreciate your time tonight. A big thing is we want to make sure that we are keeping you in line with every step of the way. This way, when we kind of get a better defined understanding of what those playscapes look like, we can go out to bid with kind of the assurance that everybody has seen everything. You guys have been brought along each step of the way. So we do appreciate everybody's time. Lance, thank you. Will, thank you for all of your help this evening. Thank you, Parks and Recreation Board. And we will once again do the do-si-do.
Thanks, everybody.
we're going to take a 5-minute break, and we'll get started again at 7:35. 5-minute break, so you can go.
No, that's okay. There's another presentation, and I can't find my clicker, so you're gonna have to click them through. Oh, okay, maybe that's why I can't find it. But this is for One North. This isn't the ATA thing.
I'll let Rick know. When you.
Yeah, you know Rick, right?
I'll let him know.
So that's there.
Okay.
What's that? They didn't bring it for us. All right, we good. How did this work? Just spread you guys on the table and we'll think we're still here.
I need that and that. No.
I'll take it.
So shoulder and.
Just FYI, Kim and I both really nice,
No.
trying to get work out. You broke it now,
You can do it. There you go. Here's the talent show.
Schoolhouse Rock kind of thing. Sue just treated me.
Oh my
Sewer treatment processes.
Good recruitment. Oh, you do that? I thought you would do it for recruitment.
No, yeah. Wow. Just look at the numbers. Is that today?
National Gun Violence Day. So it's gonna shoot somebody.
Yeah, that's a bad name.
Yeah, that's because it's actually supposed to be gun violence awareness. No, it's supposed to be gun violence awareness.
Yeah, it's not.
Shoot somebody too?
It did? Mallory's.
Your mic's not on.
The button, I push it, it doesn't always go. Okay, now we are ready to move on to item 8, One North Development Progress Update.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I would like to introduce Rick Warner.
So for the old people on the Council, I apologize. Kim's told me to start from scratch because for some of you, this will be the first time you hear anything about the project. So if we can, go to the next slide. So this is a master plan of the project, starting on the far left side to orientate everybody down at the corner. O'Reilly, the O'Reilly family built apartments, up and operating, 98% full. They say they'll never be 100% full because every month somebody moves out and they got to go in and sometimes they have to repaint, sometimes have to recarpet, but that's very successful. Moving to the right or up what I call the Spine Road or Diamond Parkway, Millhouse is another set of apartments under construction. Hopefully it'll be done in the next 12 months. Then there's a depiction of Genesis Health Clubs. They're going to have sand volleyball courts, a surfing restaurant, and a health club. Through some negotiation with city staff, we've had to redesign the project a little bit. And so we should have an updated design shortly from them. Lot 4 are the 2 Westin hotels with a conference center in between. Jay and Sanjay Kashaya own and operate that. Right before COVID, the hotels were operating over 70% occupancy. During COVID, dropped to the teens. They are recovering, but they're still not back to 70%, but they are recovering. Moving again further to the right, Lot 8 is the proposed grocery store. I'll cover the update on the grocery store in a little bit. Lot 7, we have a restaurant and we were able to get an ARPA grant. And again, a little bit later in the presentation, I'll go over what the ARPA grant is. Lot 5 is a 1.1 acre site. It is a tiny, tiny site. There are very few restaurants that can fit there. We've got a restaurant we've identified that'll go there. Marodi's is Lot 6, Old Chicago, I can't read the number, and then Starbucks. The orthopedic center that's affiliated with North Kansas City Hospital, and then Burger King. If you go to the next slide, please. So we started this in 2016, which it doesn't seem like it could be possibly that long ago. At that time, the master plan was for over 1,500 apartments on that site. Lots of parking garages, lots of vertical. In the original master development agreement, there were 3 goals: new hotel, grocery store, and again, lots of apartments. Next slide. So the other thing we talked about originally was coming up with some unique attractions and unique restaurants. So to date, we've been able to get the 2 Westin hotels, which are, in my opinion, the nicest hotels in the city. We've got 2 market rate apartment developments. We were able to get a national brand in Starbucks. Jay and Sanjay, the same guys that own the 2 Westin hotels, own Old Chicago. With the acquisition of Cerner by Oracle, the business at Old Chicago has fallen about 40%. The medical office building opened in 2019, and although Marodi's is part of the development, I really didn't have anything to do with Marodi's. It was here before we got there. Next slide, please. Genesis Health Clubs, again, it'll be surfing and sand volleyball. Our goal is to have major sand volleyball tournaments there. Maybe not year-round, but close to being year-round at the facility. The grocery store, again, I'm going to go into more detail. We've got letter of intent out with a destination restaurant, a unique destination restaurant. And then I hired a lobbying firm to help me with several things for North Kansas City. But one of the things I hired him to help me with were 2 ARPA grants. We applied for an ARPA grant to pay for some of the infrastructure for the grocery store. And we applied for an ARPA grant to do a unique entertainment venue. We were not successful in getting the ARPA grant for the infrastructure for the grocery store, but we were one of 3 ARPA grant applications statewide where they allocated money to a private entertainment business. And so we've got a vertical zip line climbing ropes course that is being drawn right now. And hopefully, depending on the pricing, we're going to have a small restaurant on the first floor with, if you can picture the letter C, where the seating of the restaurant will look up to this vertical climbing zipline course. We were able to acquire 1.4 million, Kim? 1.4 million in ARPA money. Total project's going to be at least 3 million. I'm hoping it's not going to be 5 million, but it'll be a unique destination attraction that we're going to add onto the site. And then I've got 2 potential, I'm sorry, Jesse.
Which parcel was that on, or is that on another?
So if you go back to the site plan,
Yep.
we're splitting Lot 7 into 2 lots. So half of Lot 7 will be a destination restaurant, and half of Lot 7 will be this vertical climbing. And Chip Corcoran, our engineer, was here, but he left. I meant to get him to stay. So there's a question on if I can extend vertically the climbing and the ropes course over the detention pond. So track C is a detention pond, can't do anything with it, build anything on it, but we believe we can build over it. So some of the climbing and some of the experiences we're going to put over the detention pond.
Ninja Warrior style. I like it.
And then we have 2 fast casual restaurants. Again, we can only have room for one on the 1.1 acre site. The development challenges, just to kind of set the stage, Tom Barzee and Matt Webster worked for several years to try to get somebody interested in the site. It was a brownfield site, and so the very first thing when you went to call on somebody, you had to talk about that, hey, the site's cleaned up, there's no radioactive cockroaches, that everything's okay, that it's a great site, a great location. As we had momentum and we got the hotels going and we got the medical office building going and we got Starbucks going, COVID. And during COVID, everybody stepped back and said, what's the future going to be? Are we ever going to go back out to restaurants? Are we ever going to go back to entertainment venues? The hotel occupancy plummeted. And so COVID really cost us about 2 years. And then even Cerner, even though Cerner was still open, they let their employees work from home. And so the restaurant traffic on site really took a dive. Then the council made a change in direction and said, hey, we've got enough apartments in North Kansas City. So we don't want any more apartments in North Kansas City. So instead of working on trying to get more and more housing in North Kansas City, we shifted more to restaurants in the attractions. The other thing we ran into, it took a guy from the Missouri Department of Transportation to retire for us to get permission to get access to the grocery store site. All the time that he was there, we were working, I think it was almost 2 years. Finally, when he retired, the new guy came in, we submitted the plan, and the new guy said, no problem with the new plan. So now we've got the right access into the grocery store. We were lucky in some respects that the golf venue, we didn't do the golf venue because there is another golf venue north of the river and it's struggling. And so, and Top Golf during COVID ended up selling to Callaway at 50 cents on the dollar, pre-COVID valuation. So in that respect, we got lucky we didn't do the golf venue because we might have had some issues. And then finally, the sale of Cerner to Oracle. You know, we've got a lot of empty office buildings that used to be full that gave us a lot of daily traffic. Next slide, please. This is a picture of what the Millhouse apartments are going to look like. Next slide, please. This is a depiction of Genesis Health Club, sand volleyball. But we'll have updated, we're moving everything around. We're making the outside restaurant bigger, there'll be an outdoor pool. And so this will change slightly. Next page, please. This is a depiction of the grocery store. The grocery store is 100% drawn. The plans have been submitted to the city. Once we finalize the financing, we could literally draw a building permit tomorrow. If we had the financing today, we could get a building permit tomorrow. Next slide, please. So this shows the grocery store, and the grocery store is going to be named Fresh Market. To the right where it says future building, when we drew this site plan, I did not have the ARPA grant. I'd hired the lobbyists. I was hopeful, but we hadn't drawn it yet. So now we're splitting that lot into two. Carl Yeager's coming up with a design and costing it. I'm hoping to have that in the next 2 weeks so I can come here with pretty pictures and show you what this looks like. It's actually, if it doesn't get too expensive, we've got a B-2 bomber pilot that is retiring, that's going to own the restaurant and run the facility. And on the very top, he secured an airplane, not a B-2 bomber, but he secured an airplane at the very top. So it'll be a very aircraft-related restaurant, aircraft-related facility where if we work it right, people will be able to jump out of the airplane with their safety harnesses on and have that experience of that thrill of jumping out of an airplane, 40 feet in the air. Next slide, please. So when we started, I had a period of time that I could solicit a grocery store. Then, I want to say the city on May 4th of 2018 then had the right to solicit grocery stores on their own. And the city's right to solicit grocery stores expired June 1 of 2019. And between Matt Webster and I, we contacted over 24 grocery stores. If I said restaurants, I meant grocery stores. I apologize. We contacted over 24 grocery operators. So as I was sitting here watching the park presentation, I just started to go through my mind, who all did we call? McKeever's, Cosentino's, Passantino's, David Ball, John Ball, Berry Queen, Natural Grocer, Made in Kansas City, Hy-Vee, Sprouts, Whole Foods, Aldi's, Marsh's, Don Gibson, John Lipari, Community Builders, Trader Joe's, and Walmart Neighborhood Market. So if there's somebody that we've left off, oh, and Dillon's. If there's somebody we've left off, Matt and I, again, I called them, and then separately the city had an opportunity to call on grocers, and we called on grocers. So it's been hard. We've got an operator now. We've got an operator owner. We've gone everything from a 10,000 square foot store to a 40,000 square foot store, and we're in the low 30,000 square foot. We've offered, so Amy challenged me at one meeting and said, I want a Trader Joe's. We offered Trader Joe's a free store, and they wouldn't come. Now, I don't want to bore you, but there's something called the gravity model, okay? And what the gravity model is how many people live within a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles of a store. And then they take the household income of those households within 1 mile, 2 miles, and 3 miles. And the problem we have is that North Kansas City has a lot of industrial space, and you've got the river. So when you go 1 mile, you don't have the same population, and so you don't have the same spending power. And so, I've got it here on a later sheet. So, I don't see it here, but Amy, so I ran the numbers. I had somebody else run the numbers for me to compare our site to Leawood Trader Joe's. They have 6 times the spending power. And that's why Trader Joe's turns us down. So now, could we have overcome that? Yes. But the answer to overcoming that goes against other goals of the city council. So how do you overcome the gravity model? You have to have a lot more people. Okay, so we'd have to put another 1,000 apartments on that site, and those people would have to make the households another 75,000. Then we would build up enough spending power. But without that, the gravity model kicks in, and I learned of the gravity model. I did the Harrah's Casino here 20 years ago, and that's where I learned all about the gravity model, that they measure 1, 3, 5, population, household income. People within 1 mile, they'll go to the grocery store, say 3 times a week. People within 2 miles only go to that grocery store 2 times a week. People 10 miles away, maybe once a month. And so that
wasn't Millhouse, wasn't the idea of having Millhouse, if we had Millhouse, then that put us in the spot to get the grocery store though? Yeah.
But I'm saying Trader Joe's. We do have, Millhouse does get us the grocery store.
Okay.
Okay, Millhouse does get us the grocery store. That's correct. Okay. The next slide, please. So, progress since the last meeting. We've got it originally in November, we had an operator, but he wasn't going to be the owner. When that didn't close last year, I had to shift and convince the operator to be an owner. So now the operator is going to be an owner. Then we've applied to the USDA, and we got lucky. Normally, North Kansas City would not qualify for USDA financing. USDA is for rural areas. But in the American Recovery Act, it said any city that has a food desert qualifies for USDA financing. We didn't find that out until November. So in November, because of USDA, I was able to convince the operator to own, because with USDA, he gets long-term fixed rate guaranteed financing. And so we've submitted all the documents to USDA for review. They've got generally up to 60 days. They'll take up to 60 days to review and make their comments. They've given us some preliminary feedback. We've got to respond to that feedback. I don't see any deal killers in the questions that they've asked. The other thing you need to know is that the USDA doesn't respond to developers. The USDA only responds to banks. Their customers are banks. They guarantee debt for banks. And so you always have to go through a middleman. I can't call the USDA and say, hey, what's up? I've got to go through a financial institution to get that information. But there's no firm date. You know, it's the federal government. There's no firm date that they're going to respond to me. Could be next week or to the bank. It could be next week. It could be next month.
The USDA funding is the only funding option at this point?
I don't want to say it's the only option at this point, but I have enough banks. So besides the bank, and we're not going to name them publicly, but besides the bank that is interested in doing this, I have 3 other USDA banks that have said, we've looked at this deal, we're interested in this deal. If for whatever reason this doesn't go through at this bank, we want to do this deal. And so with USDA, you get the long-term fixed rate financing. If we go back and in the last, I don't know, 120 days, interest rates have gone up another 150 basis points. So every time interest rates go up, this deal gets harder. So to offset that, the USDA really is what makes this work. Okay? Next slide, please. So, summary. We expect to hear from the USDA soon. After we get the USDA approval, it's a 45 to 60-day process. The construction contract would be signed immediately. We've got a contractor. Now, the last time he priced it was 60 days ago. We're probably going to have to go out and price it again. The good news is lumber's down about 30%, steel's down about 20%, other things are up 10%. And so we're going to have to go out and confirm those orders again. The exact timing of the construction depends on how quickly we can get the construction materials. But if the materials are generally available, and I'm told they are today, construction should take less than 12 months to build. So I think that's the last slide, isn't it, Shu? Yeah. So I'll take any questions you've got.
Councilman Smith?
All right. Thanks, Rick, for the update and catching us all up from the beginning. Few things. Are you able to name any of the restaurants, fast casual, any of that at this point?
I can in private.
Okay.
But I don't.
Just checking. We
Yeah.
got people watching on live stream. Didn't know if you could throw them a bone there. Second piece, Genesis, you mentioned there's going to be some changes to the renderings we saw there. Are they going back to full volleyball, or are they going to stick with pickleball, or what's
There's no pickleball.
Okay. The lender update, and I'll dance around this one a little bit. We're not going to name the lender publicly. I understand that, as you just said, you have the lender that you're working through to work with the USDA, and then there are a number of other lenders that are interested. My understanding is that the owner-operator prefers this lender. That's the idea that
Right.
we're working through them. If we have 3 others standing ready to lend, has there been any discussion with the owner-operator to say, hey, let's maybe talk to these other institutions who are ready to go? Or do they not have the paperwork, they're just ready to go on principle?
So we have all these documents. We've got feasibility studies, market studies, marketing studies, appraisals, all these documents. So what I did is the lender that we're working with now has loaned this operator millions of dollars.
Sure.
And so that lender has all the tax returns, all the financial information, and so we feel really good about that. But I've hit about every pothole you can trying to get this grocery store done. And so there's a broker, and I don't know, she may shoot me, but her name's Pat Case. And Pat Case is an SBA really originator, but she's done USDA as well. So just in case something went wrong with the lender that has loaned this operator millions of dollars in the past, I called Pat and I said, Pat, I may need a USDA lender. Here's the package. So I sent her all the information. So then I didn't know she was going to do this. She sent it out to 6 lenders. And of the 6 lenders she sent to, she called me today and says, I've got 3 that really, really want to do this deal. But, so Jesse, they have a summary sources and uses, the capital stack. They've got the appraisal, the market study. But what the other lenders don't have, they don't have the history with the operator, and they don't have his tax returns, that stuff yet. So I believe the lender we're working with is the fastest path forward.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, because we're lending on, or we're relying on the USDA's timeline essentially here.
Yes.
If they back it, the idea is that this lender will move forward full steam. What I would ask or recommend at this point is if we have others You put Pat on the case, she found some people, and if they're willing and the operator's willing, because we want this moving along, we don't want interest rates to get any higher, we don't want construction costs to balloon anymore. And, we get questions every single day about this grocery store. If we could parallel track this application and have, if your owner-operator is willing, send those tax returns out to, and his financial information, I mean, we know he's doing well, out to those other institutions. If you get a yes, we could move along. I understand the desire to go with the lender that's already there, but if it could move it along, I would recommend.
I'll pursue that tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
It's my understanding that it all hinges on the FDA.
USDA.
USDA, rather.
Yeah, USDA.
FDA, maybe. We haven't tried them. So it doesn't really matter about the lender at this point, because each lender would have to have that.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So that's what we're waiting on.
Yes, sir.
USDA.
Yes, sir.
And if that comes through, then the primary person we're working with would be a go.
Yes, sir.
So the others are almost immaterial.
Well, but I hear
Okay,
Jesse's point.
Tell me why the others are important.
Oh, so Anthony, so here's the one thing that could bite us, is that every lender has a loan limit per customer. Okay? So if it were determined that although this lender that we want to use has an overconcentration of credit, for whatever reason, USDA or FDIC says, hey, we don't want you to do it, I don't want to be here, hey guys, this fell through last night and I got to start all over. That isn't the position I wanted to be in. I want to be in a position to know I've got other lenders. If something goes wrong, and I'm being really candid with you, I have never done a USDA. So I'm walking down this path, everybody tells me everything's okay, but I don't know what I don't know. And so if something were to come up, I like to have a backup plan just in case, so that I'm not here next month saying, hey, this guy died, I got to go find somebody else. I want to have a plan. And Jesse, I don't have any trouble doing 3 at once.
But it still hinges on the
USDA, yes, sir.
USDA. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Yeah, just one more. You mentioned that there's no real timeline from the USDA to get back to us, but is there a norm? Like, do they usually get back within 3 months or?
No, within 30 to 60 days.
30
is
to
what they
60,
said
okay.
normal.
So I wasn't clear if that 30 to 60 applied to now.
Yeah.
I thought that was the original. Okay, so 30 to 60 days.
We'll know.
From?
10 days ago.
Okay, 20 to 50 days.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Sure.
Okay, moving on to item 9, Jim's disposal contract renewal 1-year extension.
Good evening, everybody. So really what's before you today is kind of the same question that was before you about a year ago. And that is, we do have one more extension, or we actually have a few more extensions left in our Jim's disposal contract. There is a notification process, which is why we have to have this conversation several months before the contract expires. So some of the questions that we have from the staff perspective is, would you like us to enter into another 1-year extension with Jim's disposal? Are there any changes you would like to see? Did you want us to go out for an RFP, RFQ?
Councilman Smith?
Is there a representative here from Jim's?
There is not.
I would like to hear from them on what's actually happening with the recycling. They've said on the mic before that it typically doesn't make it to a recycling center or to an end user that is recycling the product. So I would like to hear from them candidly on the microphone what's actually happening with our recycled goods. If in fact those are ending up in the same place as our trash, it seems redundant to pay for it. So I'd like to hear that. Otherwise, a 2% increase by contract seems like a great deal in this environment, and I would be in favor of renewing it, but I want to hear about that from them.
We can request that a representative come for the June 6th, I believe. I believe that that is the next time you all meet.
Okay. Got everything you need? Moving on to our regular items, number 21.
No, we have to do the consent.
Oh, I thought we already approved it. I'm so sorry.
Good try, but.
I know, moving on.
So we need a move to, okay.
Yeah.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, any opposed? No. Now we're ready to move on. Thank you, Crystal.
Item
Okay.
21, proposed 1-month KCATA contract for transit service agreements with KCATA Fixed Route and Flex Service. Bill number 7779, ordinance number 9576.
Welcome back.
Yes, welcome, or thank you for, sorry. I think this is the sixth time I've been here in about 6 months, so happy to be back. So I'm going to start off with what some things may have changed in the past 3 to 4 hours. Starting Tuesday, we had presented a 7-month contract that was based on a miles plus hours divided by 2 shared cost method. Wednesday morning, we had to change that to a full miles and hours cost method, at which point we presented that, which, as you can see, was a significantly higher cost than the miles and hours divided by 2.
It is our scenario 2, right?
Yes, that is scenario 2 in your packet. That is when Mayor DeLong proposed the 1-month contract, and then as of about 4:30 this afternoon, I've been instructed to repropose potentially the scenario 1 contract. Now, with all that said, we do not know as staff what our board will do on Wednesday. So you can pass a contract through on your end. We don't know what our board will do on Wednesday. But what we think it does as staff is it sends a message that if you are willing to support the miles and hours divided by 2 method, that is the method that North Kansas City supports. However, again, we don't know what our board will do, and we do know that the current contract expires at the end of May. So what I am potentially proposing is some kind of authorization that would allow the 7-month contract at half miles and hours first, and if that were to fail at our board, follow up with the 1-month contract with the staff authorization level.
Councilman Smith?
Hey, Bryce, my
Hey.
old friend. Okay, a few questions on this. So what was the song and dance with the withdrawal of the contract? And then, we got the 50%, and then when it got pulled off the table, got the full contract, and now we're back. So what happened in the interim?
There was discussions with the city of Kansas City, which the dollar amount with the city's contract has been finalized. The language is still in negotiations.
Okay.
And so while we thought, we believed the miles an hour divided by 2 was going to be presented, that we received notification that was not preferred by the city of Kansas City. However, after some further discussion this afternoon, there may have been some misunderstanding there, which is why I am back with hopefully the miles an hour divided by 2 scenario 1.
Okay, I appreciate that. Who specifically at the city of Kansas City pulled the contract?
The woman named Lori is the representative, but I do not know. She was not the decision maker in that. She is the messenger, similar as to I am the messenger here
Sure.
today.
Yeah, I'm not here to shoot you, I promise.
Yeah.
I'm
not.
Who did she bring the message through?
The message she called Richard Gerald, our deputy CEO, on Tuesday evening to refer that news. I do not know where she received the message and decision from.
Okay.
With any confirmation.
Sure, and you may not have the answer tonight, or you may not be able to say, I'd like that answer, because I want to have a frank discussion with whoever's messing around with the contract. That's the first thing. Second piece, the idea that we would go from full miles an hour to 50%, which I appreciate a reduction, with the implicit idea that we're supporting the miles plus hours calculation. I still can't support a calculation where I have no data. I still don't have the data behind the miles plus hours. We've gotten a number of things that say, well, it costs this much to run a bus for an hour, but there's nothing behind that. I don't know if that's got, marketing and advertising and legal stuff and all that baked in to running a bus. But if we're looking at overlaying that on the city of North Kansas City, for example, the 201, 2.5 miles up Burlington, that's all. And I think, I don't have the number in front of me for the 201, I don't think. Oh, yeah, monthly, I got the monthly one. $20,000 to run that route for 1 month, top line. I think that's, do we have that number, Kim, what it's costing, the 201?
So the 201, I think you're looking at page 3 of the memo. where it
I'm not even
says
looking at the memo. I'm
1
looking
month.
at one iteration that we got at some point.
So what I had projected out was scenario 1, which is the 50%. So the 201, service cost 201, 19,983.71.
Yeah, that's the one.
That
month.
is scenario 1.
Okay.
So that is hours plus miles divided by 2 or 50% cost share.
Okay. So the full cost to run for 2.5 miles up Burlington and open the doors 3 times, I want to say, is $40,000 per month. That's where I'm having trouble, right? Without knowing where that number is coming from, it feels just pulled out of the sky as whatever could be justified to bill an enclave city. And I can't support a methodology that there's no method shown to us. So that's where I'm at. And I've, again, not going after you here, but I've asked for that data every time this has come up ever since. So I am inclined to approve this contract simply because the bottom line number seems okay, the 119 for 7 months of operation. But that's only after a lot of federal and ARPA and other overlays come into play. When and if those roll off, we're committing to a top-line number going forward. So implicitly, we would be endorsing this miles plus hours, and I don't. It's just that simple. There's a number of things I would propose as well. The mayor and I talked about what would it look like to remove the 201 as a route we have and overlay the 238, which hits most of the most popular stops. We would have to find a way to service the upper portion of Burlington if need be. That would be something I'd like to hear thoughts on from the board and what the pricing would be there. But we're back at a spot where we still don't have the data and we're being asked to approve another contract that literally came in an hour or so ago. And you understand, I've pushed back on each one of these, and here we are again. So the other thing, sorry, while I'm on a roll here, I guess, Mr. Barzee, the language in the contract that essentially says, if this runs out of money, contract's done, we'll figure out how to pay for the rest. What does that mean to you from a legal sense? You know the clause I'm referring to, right?
I believe it's section 6 on page 2.
Okay, I don't have it in front of me. My computer died, unfortunately.
Clause number 5.
Clause 5.
Yeah.
If you could read that out loud, Mr. Barzee, for the record.
Or 5 or 6? Which one? I'm not sure.
Okay, I've got it right here. I'll read it out, and then you can help.
It is
me
the
understand.
parties understanding that, notwithstanding any provision of this contract, the maximum obligation of the community under this contract shall be the sum of $18,255. If the actual total deficit and other factors are such that the KCATA deems the full local share is not required, the KCAT will require payment of less than the total local share or reimburse the community for the portion of the local share previously paid.
And then number 6 as well. Number 6 is where it gets.
Okay. All operating costs are estimated and based off the current annual budget and CBA agreement. Should costs rise due to unforeseen circumstance, the community and KCA may mutually agree to amend this contract to provide additional operating subsidy or to adjust the level of service so that the cost of such service will not exceed the contractual subsidy. Inability to reach an agreement due to unforeseen cost increases may result in a stop of services to the community.
So unpack that one from a legal standpoint.
Yeah, well, obviously, ultimately, if you think about it, the KCATA is, has control of the situation. Why? Because you would put, you either pay the money at the end of the day. If they say if you don't reach an agreement, well, what that means is,
Service
we can't agree to pay that amount of money, then they may stop the service. Now, it doesn't say they shall or they will.
But it allows.
But they certainly are allowed to do that.
Okay.
Okay? Just so you know, Kim will tell you my version that Kim saw is significantly different and significantly marked up in a whole lot of ways.
Sure.
There is also a new clause within this contract that is before you today, and actually I compliment our city councilor, Tom Barzee, on it. I did discuss it with our friends at KCATA, but we have a favorable nation clause that is in the contract before you today. Tom, could you perhaps talk with them about what that is?
Basically, what that is, Kim was talking to me, and part of the situation that we have found ourselves in is we're first. And I said, when I was in the private practice, a clause like this got used from time to time in different types of situations. And that is, if you're first at bat, you're not going to know what the other guys are going to get. So I suggested what we call a most favored nation clause, which if you look at I believe it's in the agreement that we have here, which one, would we number it, actually? I wrote it, this is it here. Yeah, if you look at paragraph 14, right above B, on page 4, this says, the KCATA agrees that if, during the term of this contract for transit service, it enters into a contract with any other municipality or political subdivision in the district is defined as basically the counties in this area that they deal with. It's at in the first whereas paragraph. So you'll know what that is. Granting in any material respect to such other municipality more favorable rights, benefits, rates, terms, or conditions for transit service than those provided in this contract, the KCAT will notify the community, and the community shall have the option, in its sole and absolute discretion, to adopt such more favorable rights, benefits, rates, terms, or conditions, and incorporate such rights, benefits, rates, terms, and or conditions into this contract, and if so adopted by the community, such rights, benefits, rates, terms, or conditions shall apply to this contract and for the benefit of the community without further action being required of the KCATA.
I appreciate you working that in there. That's up for approval. Has the board blessed that language?
Our board?
Yes. Or is that just our proposed language?
That's proposed language.
Proposed, okay. I want that in there, and I want clause 6 under whatever section we just talked about, I want that out. That doesn't make any sense as a contract. That essentially says, we've given a good estimate, we hope you agree to it, and if we run out of money, you keep paying us money. I want that one gone. The other part, so we are first mover on this one. Raytown and Gladstone are the next two up, and I believe that's end of next month.
Gladstone is end of next month.
Okay.
Raytown operates on a different schedule than most cities. So their contract expires at the end of October.
Okay. So we've run numbers and done a budget work session that says if these top line numbers are what we end up with, not, and I've noticed how the state and federal and all these funding sources kind of move around to get to a different bottom line number. But if they're gone, this bankrupts our transportation fund in a number of years. I can't fathom that Raytown's going to sign on to something even close to this rate. And so if the favored nation clause goes in and a different contract is offered to them, all of it just seems very, I don't know, it's squishy? Yes, it's squishy. And I've asked for the data, I've asked for what it looked like with the ridership calculation. That was the other model, right? It was ridership or miles plus hours. And the ridership model brought in lower numbers to the enclave cities, which would make sense because our ridership is much lower. I haven't seen what those numbers were, and they were not proposed to us. I also spoke at the KCATA board meeting and was summarily ignored. Not only did our contract offer get worse after I spoke, but then within hours of this meeting, this has been jerked back to what was originally offered. All of this comes together to me to say, I want to reject it, but I can't leave our people without a place to go. And so my hands are sort of tied. That was the genesis of this 1-month contract to kick the can further down the road and line up with Gladstone and Raytown, so maybe we can work something out among the enclave cities that would be workable. In the absence of that, I would put out an RFP to just see what it looks like to run our own transit. This is getting so out of hand. But at this point, I would go for the 1 month. I really don't want to get locked in or endorse tacitly or implicitly the miles plus hours piece. So I would move to approve the 1-month contract.
Councilman Saper?
I agree with everything you've said so far.
Can I pause just a minute because we have a movement, but I didn't hear a second, so we're going to let that. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. The only thing I would add to it, at the same time, I would support this 1-month agreement with all the reservations that have been so far gone into. But at the same time, I would like our staff to start exploring other contractors who could provide the services for us concurrently. Is that possible, Kim?
I'm unsure that we could solicit responses and have them back within 1 month and have contract negotiated. I mean, there is a limitation on the days on the calendar, how long that process would take, and how long a contract would. I do not believe that I would have a transit solution for you by the end of June.
You can't stand up a transit system in a month, Kim? Could we concurrently run an RFP while approving this contract and then discussing with the enclave cities also, is there a legal barrier to us discussing with Gladstone and Raytown about what the next steps are? Because we're all in the same boat. I just don't know if we would be in.
I would quickly jump in on a concern on going with the 1-month contract. These ARPA and COVID dollars are allocated as per the contracts now and today. And if we don't want to get into a long-term contract, in theory, KCA consider reallocating those dollars to other cities or Kansas City. Correct.
I suppose that is potentially,
because it appears that we have a pretty good drawdown occurring right now.
Yeah, we're working
7 months.
we're working to allocate those dollars effectively and to draw them down as relatively quickly as we can.
Would the favored nation clause include the ARPA allotment?
Once ARPA's gone, ARPA's gone.
I mean, would it include any of the other federal rates, terms, all kind of nebulous terms to me? Because if we're looking at all these different types of funding, state, federal, CARES funds, ARPA funds, if they gave a different pro rata application of that to a different city, would that trigger the favored nation clause? But if they're gone, yeah, they're gone.
If they're gone,
If they're gone, they're gone. There's only so much blood you can get from a stone.
Okay.
I just have a quick question, just to clarify. So really, what we're determining tonight is whether or not we want to sign on for basically a 1-month contract or a 7-month contract. Is there no opportunity to look at any other timelines, like a
The third
3-month?
option.
Or not passing any, yes. And I will say, I do think we need to pass something for the sake of our residents who use the service. But I just want to clarify, those are our, I guess, only 3 options. There's no opportunity to say 3 months.
All right, lots of hands. I'm not sure where we started with. Will Councilmember Clark here and work?
Does option one, I mean, I just feel like that would allow the time, the 7 months, allow the city to go through anything we're proposing as far as an RFP and trying to find alternative transit, if that's on the table. But again, I'm hearing that it's not really guaranteed because then it still has to go before the board and then we're back to the 1 month.
Which I can't guarantee our board accepts the 1 month either. They haven't been, at the Finance Committee meeting today, they basically said, we await North Casey's decision for us to decide.
They had originally generated the 7-month contract.
They originally generated the 7-month contract, correct, which is
At a 50% or?
that was what was originally generated, and then it was changed to the
Yeah.
100%, which was technically what was on the agenda for the committee today. And then after the committee meeting, when they said we await North Casey's discussions, that's when the re-proposal for the 50%.
When you said after the meeting, what do you mean
Sorry,
by after the meeting?
after we had a financial committee meeting today. The committee
Okay.
then recommends things to our board. They chose today to not recommend anything, which doesn't mean things can't come. It just means that it'll be done at a staff level and then put on the board agenda. The 50% re-proposal was discussed and brought to my attention after the conclusion of the financial committee meeting.
And have you ever heard anything further on a justification for departing from the 50% enclave rate? And you might have already addressed this, sorry.
I did not, of justification, no.
Any reasoning at all?
So what he said earlier was that Kansas City did not, like the numbers didn't work out for Kansas City to have it at 50% originally, right? I'm going to withdraw my motion while we're talking about it. Yeah, I
Now
moved
really
for.
threw me off. Now we're clean again.
Yeah, I moved for the
Okay.
1 month, and I'll withdraw it. We'll keep the
Okay,
discussion.
and, Councilmember Clark, did you have anything further?
I think I just feel like if we're headed in the, I don't know, it just all becomes very confusing. But I feel like we should take advantage of the 7 months because it's been presented once again, and that allows more time. And again, still don't know if that's going to be approved or retracted to 1 month. But I feel like that's our better shot out of the scenarios.
Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, I actually agree with Councilwoman Clark because their numbers do seem kind of arbitrary, and I don't know where they're coming from, even though we got a formula. I'm afraid if we don't approve what the board has said they only will accept, that they'll throw out a huge number for the next 7 months, and then we'll be really in trouble. So maybe approve the 7-month contract and still look for other options within that time period.
Councilmember Fitzgerald.
I had a quick question related to, I guess, the 7-month bottom line dollar with the ARPA funding. Is that locked in if the contract were to be approved, or can that ARPA funding change and change the ultimate price to the city that we would pay during the term of that?
No, the federal dollars, the COVID, the CARES, CARISA, ARPA, Missouri state funding, preventive maintenance, that's all set.
Okay.
That would not change.
Perfect. And then one other question. I don't think I'm misremembering this. I may be. During one of the shorter contracts we had over the past few months leading up to this, there was language, I believe, included to define a missed route for the calculation to back the cost out for those. I didn't see that in here. I think it'd be in item 12 if it was. Could we get that added back in?
So what we actually had in here, so we took out the language specifically saying missed trip, because missed trip isn't a definition we use in our system. It's service delivered. So the language in here now is an exact match to the Kansas City's language in regards to service delivered, with the exception that Kansas City sits at 97%, and you guys sit at 98%. for the service provided. So we took out missed trips because it's not a true definition that we use in our system, so we can't define it very well. And so that's why that was changed to service delivered.
As far as service delivered, could you just briefly walk me through how that's measured?
Service delivered, it's by, we have a planned number of hours and routes and time spent, and then we have an actualized number of hours spent. For example, if we are short on a driver and a run doesn't go out, the minute that run doesn't go out, that clock is ticking on hours that aren't delivered, and that's the service, and that's what then comes back on the cost.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilmembers. Okay, Councilmember Toll.
I would be in favor of the 7 months for a couple reasons. I think we have clear direction that we want to look for something, we want an alternative to KCATA. And that's going to take more than 1 month. So locking in, I mean, I'm hoping we could find an alternative in 7 months. I would also leave it as far as item 6 goes. And the reason why is because providing service to the people is hinging on this getting approved, which is still tentative. We don't know if it will. And item 6, while not desirable, doesn't lock us into paying more. We still have to agree. So basically, you're going month to month on that. If they were to up it at any time, we could say, no, we're not going to do this. So I would accept it as is for the 7 months and work really hard on these 7 months to find out, to explore what our options are. Because I agree with Councilman Smith, with all of the funding that's subsidizing this in the package, we're already increasing by a ton, but we're signing on to that bigger number, which we cannot afford. So this buys us 7 months to find alternatives and not strand people at the end of May.
Councilmember Smith.
Okay, I am convinced that the 7 month is the better option, mostly to lock in the ARPA funding. I want to make it very clear and unambiguous that this is not a support of the miles plus hours calculation. As far as item 6, what you just said, the way it's written is that if the money runs out, if unforeseen costs that are outside of the estimates right now run out, we can opt not to pay it, but they can also stop the service. So that at that point, we're stranding people. But yeah, that would be.
But that's what I mean by month to month. That's basically like a month to month.
Well, let me follow up on that point. Have you ever come up short on a community on a contract like that?
Now, I've only ever been here since 2019, but in those 4 years, I have not seen us stop service because of a drastic increase.
And I think you have to write a policy in there like that somewhat. 'Cause, what essentially we have here is a public service that requires all these pots of money from all these communities. There's no, this isn't privatized. There's no corporate backing. There's nothing else. I mean, it is a bunch of community pots all together. So it does make sense that if something exponentially goes up, how else does that get funded? How else does service continue to run? I mean, that is the nature of a public service.
Okay. So how does this work, though, in practice? Because this is not like what we had hoped was to have an approved contract from the board to us, that we approve it and it happens. If we approve a 7 month contract as recommended by KCATA staff, it goes back to the board. Are we putting in the favored nation clause and then they could reject that? Keep the 7 months? Like, what is the mechanics of what happens next if we approve tonight?
Can I just say?
Sure.
I'm just going to say that our staff is, at a staff level, we are fine with the favored nation clause. Excuse me.
Yep.
Of the things that our board could reject, I do not see that being one of the things they disagree with.
Okay. Do you think they're on board with because it was, from my understanding, it was a board member that nixed the 50%.
It was decisions between negotiations for the Kansas City contract.
Okay.
And part of Attachment A, which is the Enclave City negotiation, which decides the cost-sharing methodology.
It was a board member, though, yeah? Who may or may not work for the
Councilman
city
Smith.
of Kansas City?
It was the city of Kansas City. I do not know who delivered the message to Lori Angie with any confidence to go back to the full miles and hours cost.
What my concern is, if we approve this and it gets rejected, we're out of contract, then what?
Then staff works very quickly to try and find a resolution, and there's probably special meetings involved that are no fun for anybody. We don't want that. We do not want to end service. We are not in the business of cutting people off of service. We are in the business of getting people to where they need to go.
Right.
Obviously, with the network of the Kansas City metropolitan area, politically and geographically, it is difficult and complicated at times. But our goal is to keep providing service and keep getting people where they need to go.
I appreciate that.
Okay,
I'll move to approve the 7-month contract.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a second. Okay, my next question. So has the 50% enclave ever been discussed in a public meeting, an open public meeting?
It is not.
Okay, thank
It
you.
is the traditional.
Councilmember Saper. Sorry.
It is the traditional method. We have technically done a lot of work to go back to what is the original methodology of miles and hours shared cost for enclave communities.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Saper.
Just a historical comment that in the past, the KCATA has in fact closed down service to cities.
I should start. When COVID hit and we had I don't think they were layoffs, they were another term. We did reduce service. Reduction. No, it was not a riff.
No.
But during the initial months of COVID, we did reduce service. So you are correct in that.
It even goes back to the point that it was actually cut off. Gladstone, for instance, at one point, all service was cut off by the KCATA.
What
And in
year
fact-
were you referring to?
Yeah,
Some context.
I'm not familiar with this.
Well, that was some time ago.
Okay.
But it has happened, and they are certainly capable of doing it again.
You're referring to the line 6 or just in general?
You're referring
In
to
general.
historical.
Okay, right. We have to have the income to run our services. So if we are out of contract, that's when. So yes, I would assume historically, probably going back to the 70s when we were founded, that there's probably been times when communities have gone out of contract, we haven't had an agreement and service has ceased. But again, in my time there, that hasn't happened. And that is not our goal. That's never our goal.
Okay, we had a motion and a second. The motion was on a 7-month contract, correct?
Yeah, and we need an amendment. Was the first reading of some kind? How are we doing this?
What is it?
So I
lost my annotation.
We've got a 1-month proposed.
Oh, it's an ordinance. Okay.
Yeah, so we have a 1-month proposed via ordinance. Do we do a,
That's how the ordinance is written.
So the
Okay.
ordinance actually doesn't specify the terms of the contract. Mr. Barzee is very wizened in his ordinance writing.
so how do we do a first reading with the 7-month
Yeah, you
condition?
just made the motion with 7 months, and so,
To
you know,
prorate
I'll
7
redo
months
it.
from the one.
I'll redo that and insert a 7-month contract
Okay.
with the ordinance, because that's what you're voting on.
All right.
Okay.
And then, Councilmember Stokes.
I just want to make sure the motion that I seconded
Yeah.
does have the favored nation clause in it.
Yep. Yep. It's the one that's
All
here.
right, so further questions, comments, concerns? All right, with that, we'll take a vote on a 7-month contract with an amendment there.
And this is a first reading?
And there was a first reading, right? There's a second on that. All in favor, please say yes.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Please read the bill.
An ordinance adopting and approving a contract by and between the City of North Kansas City, Missouri and the Kansas City Area Transportation Authority for public transportation services within the City of North Kansas City, Missouri.
I move that bill number 7779 be placed on second and final reading and passes ordinance number 9576.
Second.
Further council member comments? Seeing none. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Stokes?
Yes.
Councilmember Todd?
Yes.
Councilmember Saper?
Yes.
Councilmember Tull?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Fitzgerald?
Yes.
Councilmember Alvarez?
Yes.
Councilmember Clark?
Yes.
An ordinance adopting and approving a contract by and between the City of North Kansas City, Missouri and the Kansas City Area Transportation Authority for public transportation services within the City of North Kansas City, Missouri.
We will probably do this again in a few months.
Yes, I
Good to see
believe I
you
will see
again.
you again. Thank you,
Yes.
council. I will keep your staff updated.
All right, have a good evening. Thank you. All right, next item, please.
Item 22, amending and restating a development agreement and the purchase and sale agreement for Bloom NKC project. Bill number 7776, ordinance number 9573.
I know I should take this one, but I don't have my annotated today, so if you give a very brief, I believe we should all be up to date on this one.
Absolutely. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you may recall, at your last City Council meeting, you heard an update from the developer from Bloom NKC, who provided an updated timeline and term sheet with the project for Bloom NKC, which is the commercial property along Burlington in the Northgate Village area. Attached to this particular agenda are two amendments. One of them it is the consideration of an amended and restated development agreement and a consideration of an amended and restated real estate sale agreement. The city's financial advisor, Matt Webster, is here. Should you have any questions about the financials of this particular deal, as well as Russell is here from Bloom NKC. Should you have any questions about this particular agreement?
All right, are there any questions? Is there a motion for first reading?
First reading.
Second?
All in favor, please say yes.
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 Those say no, motion carries.
An ordinance adopting and approving second amended and restated development agreement between the City of North Kansas City, Missouri and Bloom NKC LLC for a certain development project in the city, and approving second amended and restated real estate sale agreement between the City of North Kansas City, Missouri and Bloom NKC LLC.
I move that bill number 7776 be placed on second and final reading and pass as ordinance number 9573.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Stokes?
Yes.
Councilmember Todd?
Yes.
Councilmember Saper?
Yes.
Councilmember Tull?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Fitzgerald?
Yes.
Councilmember Alvarez?
Yes.
Councilmember Clark?
Yes.
An ordinance adopting and approving second amended and restated development agreement between the City of North Kansas City, Missouri and Bloom NKC LLC for a certain development project in the city, and approving second amended and restated real estate sale agreement between the City of North Kansas City, Missouri and Bloom NKC LLC.
Thanks for sitting through all that back there. My man's been here the whole time listening to us. Appreciate you.
Next item, please.
Item 23, parking on East 22nd Avenue, Bill number 7777, ordinance number 9574.
All right, we discussed it last meeting. This would allow parking on the solid curb line of 22nd Avenue from Iron Street to Ozark Street. And it's not much more complex than that. There we go. Councilmember Smith.
Chief Freeman, we didn't have your presence here last time. Anything to add to this before we vote on it?
Yes? No? Okay.
Yeah, I actually have a lot to add on this one. No, I have nothing.
All right. First reading.
Second.
All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion carries.
An ordinance authorizing the parking of motor vehicles on both sides of East 22nd Avenue, a one-way street between Iron and Ozark in the City of North Kansas City, Missouri, and repealing all ordinances in conflict therewith.
I move that bill number 7777 be placed on second and final reading and pass as ordinance number 9574.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Stokes? Yes. Councilmember Todd?
Yes.
Councilmember Saper?
Yes.
Councilmember Tull?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Fitzgerald?
Yes.
Councilmember Alvarez?
Yes.
Councilmember Clark?
Yes.
An ordinance authorizing the parking of motor vehicles on both sides of East 22nd Avenue, a one-way street between Iron and Ozark in the City of North Kansas City, Missouri, and repealing all ordinances in conflict therewith.
Next item, please.
Item 24, license agreement for 1600 Swift Store Safe 4 right-of-way encroachment.
I don't know
Bill-
this one. Oh, sorry.
Bill number 7778, ordinance number 9575.
Shoo, please.
Luckily, I know this one. This is an encroachment license agreement for 1600 Swift Store Safe. It is currently a warehouse using. They have converted a portion of their warehouse using to offices to accommodate multi-tenants. And according to one of the tenant location, they will require an additional egress. And so the egress will generally meaning they need to open a new door. However, due to the limit of the building itself and a sanitary sewer line location, they requested to open the door swinging open to Swift. This is a 0-foot setback building, meaning they have constructed the building close or near to the property line. So The swinging of the door will create a landing and a ramp of about 5 foot wide and 27 foot long, which will encroach into our right-of-way on the Swift side. None of this will impact our pedestrian sidewalk, so staff is in support of this encroachment. I'm open to any questions.
Fantastic. Councilmember Smith.
So you mentioned the sanitary sewer is
Yes.
the portion, so that would be under the ramp piece?
No, the sanitary sewer line is actually under the building, about
Okay.
2 to 3 feet behind the building wall. So therefore, we typically would require the customer to explore, or the applicant to explore the options to recess the door inside of the building. This way, they don't encroach our right-of-way. However, this is a unique situation due to the sanitary sewer line, that the location of it, they cannot recess the door.
Yeah, if they recess the door, it'd be right on top of the.
Yeah, they will excavate the component and
Oof.
might.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's not in the sidewalk, so no pedestrian impact?
There is no pedestrian impact as far as we know.
All right.
There
First
we go.
reading?
Yeah.
It's going to be opening onto Swift. I know we've had other applicants for similar issues. There weren't any renderings, or do we have any idea of what this is going to look like aesthetically on Swift?
Yes. The customer actually have a egress that has been approved through the encroachment license agreement a few years ago. So they will have a concrete landing and with few steps and a ramp coming off and some railing on the steps as well. So this is what we know about.
Perfect. There was a motion. Is there a second? Oh, go ahead,
Sure.
Councilmember Fitzgerald.
This may be a little bit what you were covering, Lisa, but maybe it was a month or two back, there was another property along Swift, 1520, I think it was, with, I think it was a similar circumstance where they wanted a bump out along Swift, and we asked them to change it up. Are these comparable? I was just trying to understand the
So
difference here.
every encroachment is unique itself. And these two are exactly the opposite in a lot of way, why we're going after the intention. So about a few months ago, it's a 1520 Swift. What we ask the applicant to do is to recess the door, meaning they have to cut an open and have about 5 foot setback to the wall to open the door. However, the reason for that one was because they do have utilities that bared outside of the building where they propose to have the landing. And this one is exactly the opposite, where the sanitary sewer line actually stays under the area if you would ask them for recessing the door. So in this case, actually having a landing outside of the wall into the public right-of-way is a better approach.
So it's hinging on the location of those?
Depends on the location, the
Utilities.
utility.
Okay.
And this town does have a lot of old utilities. If you're asking me why is the sanitary sewer line under the building,
It might
that
not
has
even be there.
it has a lot of history on it. So
Who knows if it's actually?
It may not
That-
even be there.
there you go.
Anthony can tell you all about that. All right, there is a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second?
All right, all in favor, please say yes.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries.
An ordinance adopting and approving an encroachment license agreement by and between the City of North Kansas City, Missouri and Store Safe 4 LLC regarding real property generally located at 1600 Swift in the City of North Kansas City, Missouri.
I move that bill number 7778 be placed on second and final reading and pass as ordinance number 9575.
Second.
Was there further councilmember comments? Seeing none, call the roll, please.
Councilmember Stokes?
Yes.
Councilmember Todd?
Yes.
Councilmember Saper?
Yes.
Councilmember Toll?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Fitzgerald?
Yes.
Councilmember Alvarez?
Yes.
Sorry, Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
An ordinance adopting and approving an encroachment license agreement by and between the City of North Kansas City, Missouri and Store Safe 4 LLC regarding real property generally located at 1600 Swift in the City of North Kansas City, Missouri. Item 25, approving accounts due and payable by the city through May 12th, 2023.
First reading.
Second.
All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries.
I move that bill, no.
An ordinance authorizing payment for certain accounts due and payable by the city through May 12th, 2023.
I now move that bill number 7780 be placed on second and final reading and pass as ordinance number 9577.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Stokes?
Yes.
Councilmember Todd?
Yes.
Councilmember Saper?
Yes.
Councilmember Tull?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Fitzgerald?
Yes.
Councilmember Alvarez?
Yes.
Councilmember Clark?
Yes.
An ordinance authorizing payment for certain accounts due and payable by the city through May 12th, 2023.
Perfect, fantastic. Thank you. Staff comments. Anything tonight? Oh, I know you have something. Please, Kim.
Evening, Mayor and Council. First of all, I'll ask, is any staff member, Kevin, or Police Chief Freeman?
We're getting real casual here late at night.
Thank you. This is kind of impromptu, but just an appreciation to the council. Today, we picked up 8 of our employees that went to Washington, D.C. for the National Police Week ceremonies, candlelight vigil, and all that stuff. And so that funding was much appreciated, much needed for those folks. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have 2 quick items, just a kind of a follow-up on an item that was discussed at the last meeting on trash pickup and noise associated with it. Just to let the council know, we have notified the trash hauler that services the high school and made them aware of our ordinance. And we are working internally, should those violations continue, just so you guys kind of get sped up and understand that staff is kind of on that. Another quick item, and I did touch base with the mayor on this particular issue. So I would like to perhaps discuss special event permits, specifically special events that event transpires fully on private property. So we have a business who actually contacted us very late on Monday, yesterday evening, for an event that happens this Sunday. There are 3 weeks in between the next city council meeting, so we are unable to get that particular special event permit on either today's agenda, because we didn't have a 24-hour notice to be able to do this, and there won't be another meeting in between now and this particular business owner's event. So kind of what our question is, in the past, the city council has allowed staff to administratively approve these style of permits, specifically block parties. I don't know if you guys recall, a couple of years ago, we had this discussion where we kind of got in between meetings. I guess my question is, would you allow staff to administratively approve the 2 permits? They are both for Big Rip, in between the meetings, and perhaps could we put on an upcoming city council agenda a discussion item, perhaps to amend the city code, that if a special event was 100% on private property, that those could be considered for administrative approval?
In general, I think this makes sense, because we do have these permits. I don't want to say all the time, but it always happens, and it's always a big rush. And, you know, in an effort to support our small businesses as well, they got a lot going on, and all of a sudden you say, oh, got to put a permit in, but you're underneath that 3 weeks and you just don't have time. And there's really no action council ever takes on these besides approving them. So as Kim and I discussed earlier today, it did make sense that if it's, as she said, internal to the property, then perhaps have staff go ahead and approve these through staff. Councilmember Smith.
Is there a reason that it would have to be all on private property for staff to approve? I mean, we do block parties that are in the street.
I thought
and staff can approve that.
I thought there's potentially some difference between, you know, if you're blocking off your own parking lot versus when you do start blocking off other sidewalks, or you want to block off Swift or any other busier street. That may be something council would want to consider. So that's why I kind of left that open still.
Yeah, I mean,
especially in the commercial area, which is different than the residential streets as well, where you're supposed to invite everyone. You know, we kind of flush that out.
Yeah.
On short-term conditional use, I don't think we necessarily have the same.
Make it a discussion item for a future meeting.
I think that's the ask tonight.
Yeah.
The ask would be kind of twofold. A, would you allow us administratively to approve the 2 that we are aware of? One of them happens on the 21st, one of them happens on June 3rd. And then for us to perhaps put something together for a future city council discussion and perhaps motion to, on those particular items, to allow staff to administratively approve them.
One follow-up, you know, is there anything abnormal on these applications? There, we'll throw that out there.
We just received the one overnight, so
Yeah.
not all of our departments have had a chance to look at it.
But in general, they're just trying to have an event in their private parking.
In their private parking lot, yes.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Okay, council is good with approving those permits. We'll just, there we go. I saw majority head nod. And discuss it at a future meeting.
Yep.
Okay, there we go. Majority head nod. I'm not sure Crystal put that in the minutes. She got it. Okay. With that, we are now on. I'm sorry. Was that it for staff? I quit picking on him a while ago. With that, we'll move on to Councilmember Stokes. Councilmember comments.
Thank you for discussing River Forest Park today. Thank you for those that came from the park board. I know your time is valuable. I appreciate the discussion we had. And as you can tell, my family is very excited about it. And apparently I'm excited to sit on a bench. Also, thank you for Rick for coming and giving us an update on the grocery store. It's nice to have somewhere to refer the people that keep asking me about the grocery store. And Councilmember Smith, thanks for always eloquently addressing concerns like with the bus system and pushing back a little bit. I appreciate that. I yield.
Yes, what a night. I feel like I learned so much tonight. I do want to thank both Zach and Sadie for coming and speaking. And I agree with Sadie. I am an adult and I do like to sit. So I'm in favor of some extra benches. It was great to hear the One North development update, especially being new to the council. I'm very excited just about the future that exists there and the future grocery store. It's going to happen. I have faith. It's going to happen. I also did want to bring up, the last couple of council meetings, we did have someone come and speak about the parking issue with, and I didn't know if we had any sort of, he maybe suggested that we put up signs, no overnight parking. Has there been any further discussion of that I might have missed?
I believe at least some intention of that is to do as part of a larger study of the area, unless you've been working on something separately.
There are additional signage that staff is pursuing in that area.
Perfect. I just wanted to make sure we didn't forget about that. So, of course, you're on it already. And that's it. Thanks.
Parking conversations never stop. Councilmember Safer.
There's been a lot of talk and effort in this state and others to restrict and maybe censor materials at school and public libraries. As liaison to our library board, I'd like to report that this library board is restating their total commitment to openness and accessibility for all, to all materials in our public libraries. And I want to commend them for that.
Thank you for the liaison report. Mayor Pro Tem.
I would like to tell Sadie that I thought she did an excellent job. She did something that a lot of people can do, which is point out things that she might have issue with, but she went a step further, which a lot of people don't do, and she brainstormed solutions. They were creative, they were useful, and I feel like a lot of them could be implemented. So good job, Sadie. The time limit on no earlier than, you said we have an ordinance in place for trash pickup, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And it was no earlier than?
6 a.m.
6 a.m.
Residential.
Okay, so here's what I want to bring up. We are creating residential where residential didn't exist before. So I don't know, for zoning purposes, like the Oxbow, chicken and pickles trash is getting picked up at 3 or 4 in the morning. So is that something that can be implemented? And if not, do we look at our zoning as far as that goes? So I know it's probably something you have to take off later, but just to look at that. And as we grow and change, look at the rules and the parameters that we have, and if we need to make any changes to that. And again, I know that we've discussed it a lot, but we've talked about KCATA every year since I've been here. But we are legitimately at a time where we're looking at having doors closed anytime in the immediate future up to 7 months. So whatever we can do as a council to empower staff to look at alternatives to KCATA in a timely manner, I would just love to see what our options are before the 7 month is up, if we get approved for 7 months.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith.
Strong agreement with that. I have talked enough tonight. That is all.
Councilmember Fitzgerald.
I'll echo support for looking in the options of KCATA, and just also a lot of people took the time to speak and present tonight, so just thank you to everyone who did that.
Thank you, Councilmember Alvarez.
Yeah, I don't want to talk too much. We've covered a lot of things already, but just to reiterate, appreciate the comments from the public. Also, appreciate the fact that we were able to decide on a 7-month agreement with the KCTA, ATA. I think that'll give us more time to search out other options. And I think that's about it, really. Everything else has been covered, so thank you.
All right, here we go. Councilmember Clark.
Thank you, Councilmember Saper, for bringing forward Jennifer Boyd's application to the EIC. And Jennifer Boyd, I appreciate your volunteerism and your availability. That's the biggest key piece we need for the EIC so we can have a quorum. I still believe we need a member to represent Ward 3, so you guys get on it. Thank you, Sadie, for your thoughtful response regarding River Forest Park. I still have your letter of support that you wrote me 3 years ago. We're working on it, kiddo. Jim's Disposal, my only beef is they still don't dump my bin. I don't know if it's me personally, maybe I should go out and have a chat, like we just need to have donuts or something, but they just don't turn the bin over, so there's still surprises at the bottom of my trash bin when they leave. Arts in the Park, let me know if you guys still need volunteers, because I know that's coming up, and yeah, that's it.
There we go. I appreciate Sadie speaking earlier, even came up and spoke on behalf of her brother who didn't want to speak and went over all of his concerns as well. So starting them young up here. So good to have them up. With that, there's an executive session. Would someone like to make that?
Consideration of a request to hold and recess into an executive session is requested by the acting city administrator to be held on this date on a real estate matter pursuant to Missouri Revised Statute, Section 610.0212.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say yes.
Yes. Yes.
Opposed? No. Motion?
I have to call roll.
Show me where it's at. No, I'm just kidding. That's fine. No, call the roll, please.
I retract.
Councilmember Stokes?
Yes.
Councilmember Todd?
Yes.
Can't get one past him.
Councilmember Saper?
Yes.
Councilmember Toll?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Fitzgerald?
Yes.
Councilmember Alvarez?
Yes.
Councilmember Clark?
Yes.
All right, and now for everyone watching at home, the feed will cut off, but there will be no further public business or votes taken this evening. Thank you.